they give us that number. Well, they give us that aggregate or that maximum claims number, and we tack on the fixed cost on top of that, which is what Blue Choice gives us. We pull that down because we know it's 25%. I mean, that's an industry standard of what that number would be. But technically, you would budget a 9.6. I mean, we would hope to goodness you would not run that way. But that 9.6 is what we can compare to all of those top numbers. We sure hope we run as expected, but historically, as what Stuart's saying, historically you run worse than expected.
Well, the last 24 months.
Last 24, excuse me.
The years before that, you ran much better.
I guess, is there any way to control cost? Or do you see is because of the industry and inflation and stuff like that, costs are going to continue?
This year's awful. I'm sorry.
I'm talking in overall. Because we've seen this increase almost every year in our rates that we got to pay, and your increase is 22%.
Yep, but it's that number's been buttoned up a whole lot.
They didn't like seeing those other. Good thing we asked, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It is
Oh yeah, we were excited to be able to do this for you this year.
So there's wellness things we can do, and there's multiple ways of wellness. I mean, there's education. We talked about this a little bit last time.
Have you been doing that this year?
So there's lots of discussions about what we want to do for next year for wellness, but we have not implemented anything for wellness
So
this
you've
year.
been here since January 1st,
Yes, sir.
and you have done.
Mr. Waxman, I'm sorry to interrupt. I apologize for interrupting, but I do want to add one thing. Is that if you recall a couple of months back, HR went through a reorganization. We added an employee, went through a reorganization in anticipation of this sort of thing we can do across.
But they've done nothing this year for us.
They have consulted with us throughout that
Yeah.
process.
We have a good relationship with Prisma. You're already using them currently for the on-site clinic. I believe they're getting involved with some biometric screenings. There's conversations that we're having with them about how they can implement wellness, mimicking a lot of the 5-phase wellness programs they have going on now. That could help for sure.
Just for clarification, I think it's important to mention, and I understand what you're asking and the reason for your frustration, but I gotta say this because I don't want to slam anybody in my comment, but I'm pretty sure their contract wasn't to come in and force a wellness program. That had to be something our administrator implemented, which it sounds like he's trying to put we put the manpower in place to do that, but it's not solely their responsibility. And I may be wrong in that feeling, but I can't put the blame on these guys. I get the frustration. I can't put the blame on these guys, but I can't get too frustrated because they did come and say, hey, and we did add it in this budget year, which we're what, a month and some change into.
May I say something? I think what I was referring to was more what we talked about last time about reductions in pharmaceutical cost. You said a simple education and helping employees understand that there are some of these drugs that we're paying thousands.
But again, that's on the administration to implement that and push that. Using their resources, they can't come in unless Ken says, hey, come in and do it. I'm not going Ken under the bus in that. It's the speed of government, which is frustrating, but.
Seems like they would offer. Anyway.
I'm not covering for these guys, but I'm also not throwing them under the bus, but I'm kind of throwing them under the bus at the same time.
And Lisa Bryant with HR is here, and she has a couple of examples of the things we have done that I know is a little bit of questions.
I'm done with my question for the moment.
Vice Chairman.
So I just kind of follow up on what you were saying. You had said, all right, so if we're going self-funded, it doesn't matter whether you've got three choices, 1, 2, 3, 4 choices, right? Mm-hmm. And in those 4 choices, there's a fixed cost, 1.3 million thereabouts. That's for them to administer the program, basically.
Correct.
Okay, and then you said there's a lot of flexibility. There's lots of things that we can do. Who decides that? Because I am not smart enough to figure that part out. So who decides how flexible and what pharmaceuticals? It has to do with pharmaceuticals, or it has to do with wellness care, or those things. Who decides that? Are you waiting on direction from us, from staff, or do you guys decide that?
Well, we just provide recommendations, and then we consult with Ken and his team, and I mean we don't make the ultimate decision.
I get that, but I mean, so
So we would do the math, I mean, we would show you the upside, we would show you what you could do here. Like you
It's,
could change the
it's a
distance.
math problem. I mean, I get, but I guess my point is, if you know that out of these four choices, and obviously there's more than just four, right?
There are, we put the most competitive on there.
Okay, but out of those four choices, would you guys not see, hey, you know what, if we use a different pharmaceutical company, and I'll get lost in my knowledge in about 2 seconds, because we'll start talking about letters, like, what are they called,
PBMs.
PDMs and all that kind of stuff. But I'll get lost in that. But
PBM.
you guys would be able to see that and go, hey, Mr. Roper, we can save you another $1 million by switching to whatever.
Yes, sir, we do that all the time, and we have resources that review pharmacy contracts and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I was going to say, so when does that, how does that, help me understand, how does that work? I mean, if we say, yep, you know what, don't care what you say, we're going self-funded, we want to do this with the 1.3 million fixed cost, and we want to assume the risk, knowing that we're going to do the stopgap insurance, now go save us some money, and then when do you do that?
I mean, I think we've already done that. So the piece, the variable, the biggest piece of that pie is the claims piece. So I mean, we have clients that, I know we have the lowest admin, we've got the best network, and we beat up them on the pharmacy every single year. So that they have really, really good deals, but that admin piece is such a small piece that it's really the claims that drives the overall cost. So all of our, we'll tell you what we see and what we think you should do and all those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, it's you guys that have to implement that stuff and, write the checks, really. They're self-funded.
And I don't know if we're directly answering the question. In the event y'all make a decision, like you said, forget it, we're going self-funded. We can dive in deeper to that farm. I mean, you really might be what Mr. Whitehurst is saying. You are limited in some scope when you're fully insured. I feel like you've gotten a great deal over it over the past couple of years, and you're, in our opinion, going to have the better deal going forward this coming year at least. But in the event you went self-funded, I mean, we can rip another layer back and look at that pharmacy, but it's not going to be tipping the scale. I mean, it'll help, but it's not going to tip the scale completely back up to where these fully insured numbers are. Did that come out right? That makes sense?
Yeah.
I'm trying to answer your questions.
So, and so what y'all are saying for fully insured, you're saying it's 20, Councilman Whitehurst, you're saying it was 22%?
22% increase is what we're looking at right now. That's what this sheet shows. Now, you're saying you've got some new number,
But,
Yep.
and what are you finding is happening in the market? As far as the increases, because I know what my company, which is a much bigger company, Spectrum is enterprise-wide, but they're not increasing at all.
Yeah, so we've seen costs up across our book of business, probably flat over 2021, but 2022 still high. So not a big spike, but it spiked last year and it's still high. The self-funded market, it's roughly the same thing. The market's been pretty competitive. There's a lot of United, Cignas, Aetnas of the world. They see an opportunity where claims are high, where they can come in and write some business. And Blue Cross or Blue Choice or whoever is not going to be more. They're not going to want to. They're going to want to get as much premium as they can. So that's a perfect time for another carrier to come in and say, okay, we'll take, because they know costs are going to. The hope is the costs will come down next year. That's the hope. In the self-funded market, the stop loss has been relatively soft, so we've been able to get decent options. I mean, that's why you can see multiple options on here. But I don't foresee stop loss being soft over the next 3 to 5 years. I only see that getting harder and harder.
One example of that is we have some self-funded contracts. I have one on my desk, where we had put a no new laser in place. And all that means is that your $130,000 spec, if you had a no new laser contract in place, that if we were lucky enough to get one in place without any lasers, meaning there's 2 individuals on the plan that would have a $250,000 spec based on Berkshire's offer. But if you had a no new laser contract, they cannot add any new lasers in the next year. But I have a renewal proposal on my desk from a carrier that has removed that they've lost so much money in their book of business and with that account to where they remove that. They'll renew the group, but they're not giving them a no new laser contract, meaning they could really stick it to them the next year is all I'm trying to say. We've seen those stop loss renewals come out of the gate. Now this is smaller compared to the full picture, but we've seen them come out, some of their maximum rates of 50% and such on the stop loss rate. So we've had some good ones, had some real bad ones, but generally overall speaking, the industry has had a really tough year in 2022. And it's the tale of the 20 to 21 COVID claims as such. That have a lot to do with that as well.
Vice Chairman. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, and I guess I'm kind of confused on some stuff. I read something here recently. 80% of all the organizations in this country that have over 500 employees, which is us, self-insure. Why do you think that is? If what you're telling me here, it doesn't seem to make sense.
Must not have a good deal from fully insured, would be my guess. I mean, it's.
So 80% of all the companies over 500 employees, you need to be knocking on a lot of doors, it sounds to me.
Right.
Because what you're saying is that they're doing something wrong because it doesn't make sense here.
We're not saying they're doing anything wrong. We're just giving you the facts of the numbers that we went to the market with.
But that's the facts of the marketplace.
I love self-funded. I could feel y'all wanting to go that way, and I wish it made sense because I like it. I have lots of groups that are self-funded, lots of groups that are much, much smaller than y'all that are self-funded. It's a matter of the math equation.
It just doesn't make sense to do it.
I wish it did. I mean, I have nothing else to tell you other than I wish it did. And
3 years ago, it probably made a lot of sense.
And I was going to say, that before we were hired, the numbers that Ralph had talked to us about, 17, 18, 19, this would have looked a lot different.
But had you pulled that trigger back then, now you'd be spending a lot more this year than you did being fully insured.
Here's what you have going for you. With Blue Choice Health Plan, you just said it, you're a big company in the marketplace, and considering in South Carolina, a lot of folks think of themselves, if they have cash flow and all that, think of themselves in a better spot with self-funded. You're considered a large employer, right? In the state of South Carolina. You're a large employer in any of these books of business, mainly Blue Choice Health Plan, because that is a South Carolina only plan. And that's why you've traditionally gotten a very good deal, considering, compared against your claims. But Aetna is trying to make a splash in the marketplace with their whole health product. Cigna is also trying to make a splash in the upstate. We're seeing them be more competitive than they have in the past couple of years. You're in a good spot. It's our job not to take you, it's not our job to talk to you about all this. We have zero preference one way or the other. We actually have more fun self-funded because we have, what you don't see on here, and I do not have the file, have a full file with probably 15, maybe more stop loss markets that we went to, not including the third-party administrators we went to. We have a lot of fun doing it because we have more options for our clients. When you're fully insured, you have 5 or 6 major players in South Carolina. And my point to say all that is that we'll do this every year. We'll look at this every year, and when it makes sense, we're going to make that recommendation. But you can still go that route. You have the options. And when we want to talk about carving out pharmacy and doing things of that nature, there's disruption that comes with that. But the education that we help with employees, that'll help. I think HR is doing a pretty good job with Good RX and things of that nature they're getting out there now. But that's what we plan to deliver at open enrollment again, just hammering down with some of that the best we can to the employees. But I feel you. We want to take you self-funded. These are now, some of these are preliminary, but these are real numbers. And I know last time we were here, we had modeling and things of that nature that were projections. These are quotes from insurance carriers that we wanted to show you and give you. If we showed up with an expected number, we would not be standing here in 6 months, because if you don't run as expected, we've illegally shown you a number. We feel responsible to show you that maximum number and compare that to fully insured. And that scares us for you or any of our clients. So That's why we've illustrated it that way.
Can I ask you a question, just because I'm curious? The jump from, and this is speculation, I get that. The jump from the 2021 year to the 21-22 year was about $1.5 million. We were on a downtrend in the 19 to 20 year, and it's a no-brainer why 20 to 21 was up over 19 to 20. Because I think the numbers started in May, which May of 20 is when things were getting real, right? But the 21 to 22 numbers being $1.5 million higher. Any speculation, or I hate to use the word speculation, but I know like the federal government paid for some things, and healthcare providers were getting reimbursed from FEMA or from the Department of Health and Human Services or whomever it was, and it wasn't coming from. And then some of that stopped. Is that some of that, or any idea?
Well, I think you'll see next year. I know a lot of the providers now are trying to get more money from the insurance carriers because they're getting less money from the federal government right now. So I would say next year you're probably going to see more of it than you did the past two. I think 21 and 22 is there's a piece for COVID, right? But there's also a piece where people just didn't go to the doctor. So you've got delays in services, but you've also got where people just let themselves go. So if they would have gone in 20 or 2021 and they didn't get there till 2022, then they've waited 2 years, and it's just that much worse. I think you're seeing a plateau now, but I think, and this is speculation, right? So, but what I'm hearing from every provider across the state's asking Blue Cross for money. Like we got to change our contract. So, it'll just depend on what the services rendered are. So if you've got some higher claimant or some higher cost services that are rendered during the next 12 months, then it's going to cost 15% more because of medical inflation. I think we'll see that.
And this, actually another client that Stuart and I worked together with found out today, this fella, he's been having some abdominal pain. And I'm not saying this is what happened, but someone that might have immediately run to the doctor for something in 2020 or 21, they might have delayed that. This fella ends up with colon and rectal cancer. I'm not speculating that could have been prevented, but I mean, it's things like that, and that pops up, and that's now probably going to be a very, very large claim. Year to date, you have 17 high claimants, and that's just on a trigger report. They pull at 50,000 or higher, but 5 of those claimants were over 100,000. So there's to some of your $1.5 million up we're talking about. And some of those looking through there, I don't want to say them out here, on record here, but of what some of these claimants are, those are not necessarily preventable situations that have maybe just built up. So we can always get you a copy of this if you'd like to take a look at it too. So, but it's a growing problem for sure.
I was just trying to justify that $1.5 million increase, and you're right, doctor's visits were down, early 20, even into end of 20. Right. A lot of telehealth visits, if anything, and then rolling in so far in 22, it seems like people are playing catch up, to your point. But I have also seen the reimbursement model change a little bit, where we were relying on government funding and healthcare for certain things. It's not there anymore.
Right. And
I didn't know if maybe that was falsely made the 2020 to 2021 numbers look better than they really were, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But isn't it also true that the reverse of that would be true, that where people they've waited for colonoscopies or for whatever, and now they've done it all this year, and now next year it's gonna.
Now they're diagnostic claims. Those
Right.
the preventive claims that finally people got
That they got around to, or the surgeries or whatever that they couldn't do because of COVID, they had to put it off,
Oh,
and
yeah.
now they've got those out of the way.
Yeah, your electives
So-
are caught up, and then all your preventive stuff may have caught stuff that's made that more diagnostic now. So you're getting a double whammy of it, essentially.
Right. So, but I'm saying that going into the next year, wouldn't it?
In theory.
In theory, on both sides, on the side where people didn't do it, and they waited too long, but on the side of where they now are doing it, is going to kind of level out.
Correct.
Right.
Now, the other piece of that too is I don't think there's very much turnover here for employees, right? So you've got to also put into that equation, your employee base is getting older and older and older and older every single year. So when you go from 40 to 45, your claims, I mean, that's when I started breaking down, like 40, healthy as a horse till 45, and then everything fell apart, right? But as your employee base gets older, that's when, if there aren't people coming off the plan and young people coming in, that has an impact on your projected claims for next year too. So that's another piece that we consider as we look at this every single year.
Can I go back to the sheet that you were reading off of to begin with, the review? Just because I'm going to play completely and totally ignorant here. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. You'll have to figure it out. But looking at, it's the fully insured, I get those numbers. That's what it's going to cost us, and that's just what it's going to cost us. When you get down to self-funded, breaking down, so like the Berkshire, the stop loss expected, and then the maximum. What do those two numbers represent?
The expected and the maximum? Mm-hmm. So the expected would be that company's estimation of what they think your claims will be.
Okay.
And the admin.
Okay.
But go back to what I said before, they base that on the maximum.
Oh, right. I understand that. So then the 12-15 contract with the 130,000 specific, what does that mean?
So that means that it's a paid contract. So there's incurred contracts, so incurred and paid in 12 months. And then that's a 12-12, and then a 12-15, so it's incurred in 12 months, but you get a 3-month window for it to be paid. So a large claim that happened in December, it would be until end of March to get paid.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it basically gives you like a tail. So if we went self-funded and you had a big claim that hit the week of Christmas of 23, it hasn't had a chance to get filed from the hospital and all this back and forth, so you need additional run out. We call it run out. I call it run out. That tail covers that'll get you 3 months for the chance to be paid. And the contract is built with 130,000 specific. That's that stop loss and specific. Same terminology, two different words, sorry. But that is the county's responsibility. Don't think of the employee's deductible responsibility, but once their part's done and your portion kicks in, your responsibility up to 130,000. So if it's a $200,000 claim, Berkshire will cut a $70,000 check back to the county. However, if you don't have that run-out protection, and you had a 12-12, for example, and a big claim that's in December, you'd be on the hook for the full $200,000. So it extends your contract a little bit further in the event we have any late claims. We show a 12-15 to match up to fully insured. We also quoted 12-12. In the event we pulled the trigger to go self-funded, we have an option of doing a 12-15 so that you have exit protection. We could leave self-funded down the road. Or we could look at a 12-12 contract, which actually would be cheaper. And then the next year you buy a run-in contract. But then you're pretty much locked in forever unless we buy some terminal liability offerings. This is a simpler way of matching up fully insured. 12-12 is going to be a smidge cheaper.
Okay, so the going the route of the self-insured, what is it? How do you pay for your stopgap? Where does that cost come in? I guess I'm asking, is the stopgap 7.9?
No, so of the 7.9, and actually, what I have right in front of me, if you'll go down to the Crum and Forrester,
okay,
the 7.832, your stopgap and your administration cost. Well, I'll give you the full thing here. So Blue Choice, you're going to pay them $368,000 and $368,640 is what their administration costs are. Your stopgap coverage is $871,838. There's 25, almost 26,000, which is aggregate protection. That's if we have a blow up year. Comes up to a total of $1,266,345. That is the fixed cost or your
self-funded, self-insured.
That's going to be your fixed cost. Everything else is claims.
So we'll go 1.2 million to pay somebody to protect us, and then we carry the rest of the liability up to 130,000 per claim, and that's where.
Which Crum and Forrester banks on 6.565, to a range of 8.207
For claims.
for claims alone. So it's lots of parts there, but you got your fixed piece, which is 1.266, and then the claims piece.
So, real quick, because I'm dovetailing, so the 25% you're talking about is already included in that 7.9? You've already reduced it by 25%?
Yeah, so the numbers I just gave you of 8.207 out of that 9.473. See the 9.473 on number 2 of Blue Choice at the very end?
Yeah.
8.207 is the max claims number out of that. If you add 1.266 to 8.207, we get the 9.473. We reduced the 8.207 by 25% to get our expected number,
Okay.
which is 6,565,693.
Can
Councilman
I, going back to how they figured that first number, you know, what they're looking at for your claims, they base that on the claims from the previous year.
The 24 months.
Yeah, 24 months of whatever you had at that point as far as the same, whatever pharmacy, whatever hospital. They look at existing stuff and as if nothing changes and project to the future of what's going to be. So there's no,
Yeah, so they're basing that,
off whatever we've been doing in the past.
well, I mean, for example, these stop-loss carriers quote based on which network. They obviously know you're currently on Blue Choice network.
So it's all based on being in the same program that we're in.
Well, with Blue Choice, but then we're also United, and then we have Evolution Healthcare. Aetna and Cigna also quoted that as well based on their network utilization.
But they base this off of our current Blue Cross program?
Right, so the two, Berkshire and Crum & Forster, yeah.
Both of those are
Blue
based
Choice.
off basically what we've been doing the last 24 months, and they say, here's what we expect to be your claims based on your population and the program you've been on.
And based on your network discounts of Blue Choice and the discounts you're getting through.
Yeah, but whatever program we're in now, that's what they're basing that off of.
They look at it for their book of business too. They adjust it for that.
But they got to look at our plan.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you. That's,
Okay, that's all. I'm just making sure how they came up with that number.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you figure out what that meant?
So I just want to be clear that, so that expected 7.9, so if we had 7.9, because we're at 7, from that last little run we looked at, if we were at 7.9, it's an additional 1.2 on top of that 7.9 if we had 7.9 in claims. Is that right?
wait a minute, I don't think I heard you.
So like, let's say that they're expecting us, the expected says 7.939074, that's Berkshire stop loss. So is that 1.2 on top of that, or in
No,
that?
that would include your administrative cost. And that number's a little different than the Crum & Forster numbers that I don't have that firm number on this spreadsheet.
No, I got you.
I mean,
I just wanted to be clear, so they're saying that we should have a little over 6 million in claims and then 1.2 million to them, kind of thing. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually think Berkshire's was
Man, I do easy math.
1.1 significantly, yeah, that's right.
If you don't mind. How do deductibles play into this? Who gets the deductible?
So to Mr. Whitehurst's point, the plan design, everything's set up identical. So when we send our stop loss quotes or requests for proposals into the stop loss carriers, they ask for population, census, your claims data, and then your plan designs. So deductibles and all that would act your employees would never even know if you went self-funded, if you stayed under Blue Choice. And the only way they would know is if we move a network or we change a pharmacy or anything like that. Your plan design, the way it's set up now, we can, or change it, we can set it up identically the way it is. Blue Choice builds that contract the way you'd like for it to be built. If it's mimicking exactly what an employee's responsibility is now, we keep that. Now, that $130,000 deductible is behind, that would be after the employee pays their portion of it.
So I guess where I was going is to protect the people who work here, that the deductibles aren't changing and all that kind
No,
of stuff.
I mean, unless you want them to, you can build it however you like, but this was quoted based on current structure. And honestly, if you double the deductible the way it is right now, it
No, I don't
probably
wanna
wouldn't
do that.
fluctuate these rates that much.
Right.
They're looking at, the $200,000 claims. You
Which
know
is-
what I'm saying?
Which is a very interesting point you bring up, because looking at United Healthcare, it seems like every time you turn around, somebody's negotiating with United Healthcare,
Oh, yeah.
no matter the hospital system out there.
And Cigna
It's-
too.
Yeah, and so to the point of protecting the employee, that's something to keep in mind as well when you talk about the other options. I'm not against the other options. I'm just simply saying, if you want it to appear the same but be different, you have to be apples to apples.
Right.
What other questions? Any? Anything?
No. I'm good.
Mr. President?
I'm
Mr.
good.
Secretary? Mr. Roper, anything we may be missing?
No, sir, not unless you have further questions. I think the guidance we're seeking here is quite simply the risk that the council wants to undertake. There's a chance for some significant savings. There's a chance for us to also experience some significant loss. So it seems to me that's a policy decision this council needs to make. It doesn't necessarily have to be made tonight, but it needs to be made in short order, so that we can give them into instruction.
What is short order?
I'd say, I would ask y'all, when y'all need further guidance on this.
It would make it, we would have, if you could just pick self-funded or fully insured, that gives us more leverage with carriers to negotiate which way to go. So, I mean, the sooner we can find out, the better.
When's open enrollment going to be? October? End of
That's the
October?
thing, is last year we pushed open enrollment back because we were having some of these conversations then as well. We don't want to get too late into late October, early November, because it starts causing anxiety on all sides. So I would say guidance tonight would be ideal. This would just be a recommendation because you'd actually have to prove it to the full council in October.
Correct, nothing can happen till October.
That's right. That's right.
How soon will we get the preliminary offers from these other companies? Do you know?
These are the prelims, but the firms, I guess if the firms change up the prelims, is that something you guys would let Lisa or Mr. Roper know, or?
For sure.
Okay.
I mean, fully insured is, those are pretty firm, but there's still work to be done, for sure.
Meaning there could be a little bit of negotiation left to get those. I mean, they're firm, those rates are guaranteed for the next 12 months, beginning 1/1. Yes, the updates we got from Blue Choice, we'll be sharing those this week. But the preliminary offers, we have to have September claims data, which typically comes in the second week of the following month.
Okay.
So it would probably be the middle of August or October,
Yeah, okay.
and then another
Okay.
week turnaround from the underwriter and such.
Anything else? Councilman?
I don't have any more questions for you. I've got stuff I have an opinion on this, and I'm not attacking you guys. You got a job to do. But I've spent several years studying this stuff, and the idea of what you're describing as self-insured is not what 80% of the companies in America are doing when they do self-insured. That's just not what they're doing. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it, because it wouldn't make financial sense. But this council may decide to do something entirely different.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. Yeah, 22% increase in medical costs are crippling. You know those numbers are probably going to get worse over time. The amount of medical benefits that are paid out by these governments, whether it's the school district or county government, is just unsustainable in the long run. And there's got to be an effort to lower costs somehow. I think I would go self-funded. I make the decision tonight. We can't pay 22% increases annually. Just can't. I give Trey credit for looking at it. I mean, this should have been done years ago. We have to do something else. I mean, it's going to just get worse over time. So I would go to self-funded route myself, but.
Say, is that a motion?
No, can I make a point to this?
Wait, Mr. Chairman, point of order. Are we going to have discussion now, or are we going to have a Are we gonna have a motion to focus the discussion?
Well, it's a committee meeting, but it's always good if we have a motion to lead discussion or direct discussion. So if someone has a motion,
So we can discuss openly? Fair enough. Go ahead, Trey. Sorry.
I believe going self-funded, but not with a TPA of one of the either Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna, or any of those guys, because it's basically the same program we have now. And y'all just described it as that. The stopgap insurance you figured up is based on what we've done the last 2 years of the same program. And you adjudicate claims at $50,000 and above. We don't have access to all the data. We don't have the granular access. To get another TPA who's an independent TPA that works for us, they would look at all those claims. To get a pharmacy plan that works for us, if we did nothing else. But what you've got here is the same plans with the same companies and the same contracts with the stopgap insurance. So if we're going to motion here to go self-funded through you, I would vote against that. Okay, and I'm not trying to be ugly to you guys, because that's where you are. But what you're showing me is basically Aetna being the TPA, managing everything through the same programs they've always done. And if we're trying to save money, the people that are making the money are the ones managing the money. To me, there's a whole conflict of interest there. We need to find somebody that can come out there and work for the county and find a TPA here, a pharmaceutical plan here, a hospital doctor plan there, that we can bring those pieces and parts together and have a broker that can help administer that. And I just don't feel like that's what y'all's specialty is. And please don't take offense to that.
We also brought you Evolution Healthcare. We didn't talk much around that. It's at the bottom of the page. They're an independent TPA. You'd have to have a network.
I understand you have to have a network.
You can rent Aetna, in that case, they rented a Aetna network. I believe that was, it was quoted through, that might be Southern Scripts, BBM.
But they're basically through Aetna. They rent the Aetna network.
Evolution Healthcare
Yes,
you have to have a network is his point.
Understand, but they're doing.
Evolution Healthcare is what you would want. That's why we went to it. And
Right,
They
but-
manage claims at a granular level. They try to move people to places where they negotiate the contracts even past the negotiated discounts. That's what Evolution Healthcare
Have you
does.
worked with-
But even under that model, the expected 7.3, your fully insured premium's probably not gonna be over 7.1.
And
So
that's-
why would you not, why wouldn't we wait a year or two to see how our claims kind of level out and then go toward
See,
being
I
self-funded?
think that's where the difference in philosophy is, okay? Is that the claims that are based here, the expected claims, are based on what we've been doing in the past, right?
So,
So
yes,
they're basing it on what we've done in the past, not what we're doing in the future. I understand how they have to come up with that number. But
there's a factor built in for that in your evolution.
have you worked with Evolution?
We haven't moved a client to them yet.
Okay, so you're not familiar with them. You don't, what do they do for cost savings?
There's just another layer of management.
So if you have a claim, it's actually a cool new program coming out the pipe. Give you all a little bit of teaser on it. We're going to talk more about it in the future. United Healthcare's got a similar program, but again, I know we're talking not big box healthcare, but Evolution. If you go, and WellNet's another one actually has a similar model. But if I have a procedure that I have upcoming, and this will be a voluntary procedure, I have a niece or whatever it may be, I research the cost of that care. Okay, people can do that on their Blue Choice plan now, but they don't have any incentive to do so. And doing that with Evolution or a WellNet or something like that, they can get incentivized either through plan design or through a check back to them from Evolution Healthcare. Why would they do that? Because they're going to get, they're going to make basically the same cost or same quality of care for a cheaper cost out of their own pocket, and it lowers your overall spend. And I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for, but that's one small example of companies like Evolution and such. Now, I do think there's a trade-off that's not considered in a lot of the glitz and the glamour with that opportunity, is you lose some of the discount that you have. You have the largest discount in the state of South Carolina with the Blues. But you very well could offset with more of that with, directive healthcare. So that's an option, that is an option as well. So we wish your claims were just in a smidge better position, because we feel like everything on the bottom of this page at 2/3 down would be a little bit more attractive against the fully insured. Again, like Stuart said, I mean, these are guaranteed numbers at the top. There's a lot of variable at the bottom in the max case. I get what you're saying, that it's based on the current arrangement, but even if we put in something like that, it's gonna be so new and a lot of disruption to employees.
A TPA doesn't affect the employee at all.
Will in fact the employee when they pull out specialty pharmaceuticals where there's
Now,
no coverage for that
pharmaceutical
anymore.
is different than
It
the
works-
pharmaceutical is a different part of the plan than a TPA.
It works the exact same way. So if you pull out specialty farm, if you narrow the network, if you force people to go over here versus going over there, it works the exact same way. And then the small dollars, I think it takes away from overall healthcare, because they're gonna go to somebody they don't trust. If you go to somebody you don't trust, and
And
they
let's
tell
be
you to go
careful, I
over
don't
here.
want to get into
I
it
know,
back and
I know.
forth here.
But
And-
we're
and-
talking, I'm telling him apples and he's talking back to me oranges.
So if I understand what he's saying, I understand you're actually on the same page, but the way you save money with a private TPA and not a big box TPA, the way you save money is by doing the things that he was describing and explaining, by targeting and directing to a certain way. It's kind of the same conversation that we had over direct primary care and this, that, and the other. And the whole argument against that is you want the least disruption for our team, at least at one time. That's the big concern, is the anxiety that comes with major change. And if you stay with the big box blue option, whether one of those top two options, the team member here at the county don't have a hill of beans difference clue. They don't know there's a difference or a change. We know it, but they don't. If you go with someone, I won't use the name on the list, but a TPA XYZ that's an independent, they're going to save you money, but they're going to save you money because they're going to say, this is the only doctor you can see, or this is the only pharmacy that you can use, or we're not paying for this medication, and they're going to be able to save you a ton of money. And then you got something somewhere in the middle of the two extremes. That's what you're saying.
That's exactly.
But that's exactly how your independent does it. And the reason I think that we see the blue choice at the top there, or the blue options at the top there, is when you're talking about the most undisruptive for the team member, that is the obvious. Because to my point earlier, I said what I did about United Healthcare, because if we went with that option, which is a little less, you're going to expect some disruption for our team members. But that's part of the thing. That's the reason they gave them all to us to look at. I haven't heard him say, you got to go this, that, or the other. There are perks to everyone on the list, and they're to your point. I'm sure there are others. So you got to weigh out: is it purely a dollars and cents, or is it an employee satisfaction, employee retention, peace of mind, whatever? There's got to be a trade-off there.
Can I?
Absolutely, 100%.
I appreciate it. I'm gonna respectfully disagree with
Okay.
what you're saying. We can have a TPA that does, when I say adjudicate the claims, typically Blue Cross won't look at anything under $50,000
For what?
for adjudication. It's automatic adjudication,
Blue Choice is actually a little bit lower, but yeah.
a little bit lower. We can have a TPA that will look at every claim, and that doesn't affect the person made the claim. It's going back to the hospital. So that's something that no employee would ever see or
No,
know.
it does affect the employee, because they get when they don't pay the claim, that provider starts sending.
No,
you
they go back
collections.
to the hospital and see for errors that come through in claims. And
Those
most of these things
hospitals
are
will-
errors that the hospital makes, that when adjudication comes through, they correct the errors.
Okay.
The second thing is we can change a pharmaceutical and it won't affect the employee at all. They'll see it no different one way or the other. It's just a contract we have.
That's not true either.
Okay, well, then you and I will disagree on that. I know you've been in the business a long time, and I think I'm not gonna be able to change some stuff.
Vice Chairman, go ahead, Vice Chairman Cox.
You had mentioned something, you had said that you just wanted to know from us whether we wanted to go fully insured or self-funded. That would help you because then there's still room for negotiation?
Yes, sir.
So we may be able to get better numbers than what are on here now.
Yeah, not a huge amount, but there's definitely room to get another point or two on fully insured, and there's definitely, on the self-funded side, negotiating the pharmacy rebates and contracts and terms. I mean, there's still room to negotiate there, but it's not gonna be a huge amount.
So if we went self-insured and it was one of the Blue Cross, the Berkshires, or the Crum and Forster, and we then in a year, can we go, you know what? We want to think about what Councilman Whitehurst said with can we change?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And really, with self-insured, it's the 1.3 million fixed cost, thereabouts. And then it's based on the claims. And a lot of that's based on education, which we haven't started yet. Okay, we've done a little, but we haven't done enough to make a huge impact. And that education has to do with understanding that there are some drugs you don't have to pay $10,000 for. You can get a coupon and get it for $10 or whatever it is. And it's also about preventative wellness and things like that.
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay, so.
That's what a good TPA will do for you. Anyway.
Councilman Wilson.
I haven't spent as much time as Mr. Whitehurst has. I keep falling back on, my attorney told me that, I'm paying him for the advice and I get to choose whether or not I'm going to get my money's worth by following it or not. And he's definitely not going to go to jail with me if I don't follow his results, right? The thing for me is, I have a PhD in mechanical engineering, and you guys made me feel incredibly guilty. I guess there's early steps in 12 steps where you have to go apologize to everybody that you've wronged. I feel like talking like an engineer to regular folks has been an absolute crown, and you guys are taking that to the next level here. I have just an incredibly difficult time following what you guys are talking about, so I understand that there may be a difference of opinion here, because what it feels to me like we're gambling on is the idea that this isn't an irregular year following this COVID thing, which was, just such a farce in some ways and such a tragedy in other ways. The idea of having a stabilizing year, which appears to me to be the recommendation that you guys are making, that things would have looked good for us for a decade, and then for the last few years we'd have lost this is what I recall you telling me, that we would have reversed all those gains that we'd made just in this irregular sort of market that we're in. And then maybe this year is not the year to take this type of a gamble, because who knows what is going to be going into next year. Would the backlog of care, the potential exponential impact of not having care for so long, those kind of things. So, we're not gambling for what appears to be documented here, a perceived attainable gain. We're gambling against whether or not the loss is going to be significant or not significant, is what it seems to me. I have my inclination through this entire process is to be self-funded, so that the pain's done. If yet next year is a better year for this type of market, we'd be past the learning curve, we'd be past the pain, we'd be past the understanding with the end users, et cetera. So my inclination, I'm a small business owner, so every day is a risk. And if this were my business, then I would take that risk. But this is not my business. This is a business we all mutually have to govern, and it appears to me that it's a 50-50 guess, and I would go towards the risk first versus the stability. But since it's the people's money and it's all of us, my inclination would be to revisit this next year, but to revisit it through the purchasing process, because you guys came in and you're the folks that we've decided that we're going to listen to this year, and then maybe pursue what has been talked about here with the a la carte method as something we engage you guys in again, and then maybe other folks, so that we have a better chance to maybe recognize the opportunities that you're talking about, Mr. Whitehurst. So right now, unless I hear anything different, my inclination is to go with the fully insured for this year, and then to revisit this very aggressively through the procurement process and throughout the discussion for insurance.
Anything else? So we've been discussing right at an hour. Is there a motion?
I move that we we pursue the fully insured process as initially stated here and see what final opportunities can be resolved in a negotiation process with our broker.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Could you repeat that? I didn't hear very well what you said.
I believe,
Sorry.
Madam Clerk, just to make sure you have it clear, the motion is to proceed with the fully insured options as discussed with our broker. Is that correct?
That's right.
I'll go ahead and second that, get it on the floor.
So we have a motion and we have a second to move forward with the fully insured model as presented tonight. Discussion on that.
I have a question.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Whitehurst, when we were looking at the self-funded under the Blue Cross and understanding, and I get what you're saying about you're still using the big boys who still use the same numbers, who still whatever. However, is it your opinion that we would pay about the same, or I mean, going self-funded even if we took that initial first step?
If we did it through what these guys are offering here, it's basically the same thing as fully funded. It's just dressed up to look like self-funded.
Okay.
Self-funded is where you're going to take the components and have someone that brings you a separate component for your pharmacy, a separate component for your TPA that you have full control over, not a big company that you may struggle to get data out of. You'll have all the data, and then you'll have a network that you'll find it. And at some point, you may want to add in something like a direct primary care. There's other things to do, but all I was hoping for this year was to move in a step where we could have an independent TPA, not one of the big blues. Or, I'd like to have the TPA come up in front of us and talk to us, and interview them and see how does that, because, we've got through you guys, and have the pharmacy plans are written all sorts of different ways.
Evolution actually asked for a meeting, depending on how this meeting night went,
the pharmacy, when you say that it's all the same, it's not. The contracts are written, there's rebates that come back to these things in the thousands of dollars. Who gets the rebates on those things?
With the blue plan, who would get the rebate on the self-insured?
I mean, you guys would get a part and they would get a part.
Okay,
And that's agreed in the contract, I guess?
so it depends on how you write the contract, correct?
That's right.
Who gets it now if we're fully insured?
We don't get rebates now, or they're?
That all goes to,
Blue Choice holds all that with their arrangements. Of
there are script programs that cost $1 per write. There's some that cost $10 and $20 per write.
So I'm going to say, just because I want to go on the record to say, I'm actually extremely torn about this whole deal, kind of to the point that Dr. Wilson was making just a few moments ago. I have been a huge advocate of this, but the one thing I know that we have several job openings. We've been trying to hire truck drivers and EMTs and paramedics and environmental services. I mean, you name it, we've been trying to hire it for as long as I can remember. And health insurance is one of those things that causes angst. I'm sure this nice deputy that works for the county standing in the corner is sitting here panicked. I'm about to get my world rocked. I'm just joking, man. But in all seriousness, I think in order to save the level of funding that you're talking about saving, our employees will gain a lot of angst in doing that right off the bat, the flip of a switch. And I'm not that kind of person. That's just not. I know I wouldn't appreciate it, and I kind of keep that going in the back of my mind. I also do believe that last year, because of everything going on in healthcare, and I meant everything I said. Some of it was baited, but I see it. I deal with it, and I know because I do keep up. But I do think that there are ways to save a ton of money, but there are ways to cut a lot of the benefits out, period. And I don't think that's the right answer. I don't think that's fair to the people that work for this county. And I know that's an extreme. But while I'm all for it, I don't think it's the governance level for us to sit I feel like we may have gone a little far tonight with the nice folks from McGriff, but I don't think it's necessarily the governance level for this council, and that's where we have differing opinions upon the 6 of us. But to bring in a TPA and us work with a TPA, I don't think that's right. We don't do that with anything else. I don't think that there's any exception to that. At the governance level, this is what it costs, this is what we're willing to pay, this is the direction we want to go, and it's your job, Mr. Roper, to do it. And that's just the way I feel about it. And if we're not careful, you get down in the weeds to the point you're no longer in the governance level and you're in the operations level. And we have to be mindful of that when we give direction and when we want to go down a path, because I don't think it's right for us to be in the operations. I don't think that's the intent of the state law, nor do I think it's our place.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wilson.
So I've worked for, I think all of the major manufacturers that I've worked for were self-funded, and they all changed, the account handlers on an annual basis, it appeared. And every year you're getting a new card, and every year you're getting a new telephone number, and every year you're having to call somebody different, there's a new approach to it. This drug was on last year, this drug's not on, blah, blah, blah. Every year it was hectic and frustrating. And it was a part-time job for my wife to figure out, if we could still see our doctor, how do we call it? It was kind of a train wreck. And all that is to obviously pursue cost opportunities for the whole enterprise, being publicly traded organizations. That is not, in my opinion, in a hiring environment where our health insurance is one of the principal issues. And we're talking about the bottom end of the pay range where it was at just the other day. And you guys countered my criticism, I would think, with the idea that the benefits, et cetera, are one of the big pieces that draw folks here. Like I said, I would very much like to roll, like Mr. Seda said, and start going through this and gamble on the idea, not gamble, but gamble on the idea that we will see some savings this year, but it's a fluid market, and I would be remiss if I just didn't fall back on security in this case in an engineering fashion.
Vice Chairman Costner.
So to me, it's a gamble either way, and I am I am really more inclined to go toward self-insured, because I think in the long run that makes sense. Excuse me. What I don't, and I'll be the first. I'm not smart enough to know about your world. I've tried to educate myself as much as I can, and it's been a very long process and learning the things that we have. I have seen the numbers that show a substantial amount of savings if you do it right, without losing any of the benefits of you've got to choose. You don't get to choose your doctor. You don't get paid this whatever prescription. I've seen the numbers where it looks like it makes sense and that it would be a cost savings to us, but I'm not smart enough to figure that out. That's why we have people like you, or we hire people to do that. So Councilman Wilson, my struggle with this in supporting fully insured is that we're still right back at square one, and it's a gamble there that we're going to pay for sure $6.5 million, $6.6 million for sure, because that's what the premiums are going to cost, right?
Right.
So there's the gamble there is that it's going to cost that, where it might not if we went through something self-insured. And again, that's what with the chairman, I'm really struggling with it, because I don't like thinking I've got to gamble either way with taxpayer dollars. It's not my money.
I mean, the whole process of insurance is a gamble, right? It's a profit-generating enterprise where the folks that have the most data are setting the cost, right? I think that Mr. Benball explained that you were the guy that set the prices for Blue Cross in the state, right? And that if you'd been in that role, that last year you would have attempted to raise the rates a little bit because you see the risk and benefit and opportunity associated with doing it. And they just ate a bigger loss than they needed to by not adjusting their rates. Right. So Mr. Benball is clearly very experienced on the other side of the fence, where they have all the data, or the preponderance of the data, and a broader spectrum associated with it, right? So like I said, if you guys want to argue about mechanical engineering and engines and whatnot, I'd be glad to do that in the hallway, but we through our procurement process selected these guys for their advice. Your advice has been consistently the same thing, and clearly you guys are experienced in this particular world. I would say that next time, though, We open up the floor, from a competitive perspective to somebody that would take us fully funded with the à la carte method. And then that's a full examination with a real comparison.
And I'm sure these guys, because you talked about evolution and you said there's others and all the things, I mean, you got a minute to look and see, I mean, you understand what I'm saying there? Yeah. Any other questions, comments on the motion at hand? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Thank you, gentlemen. We'll move on to, and again, that's not taking immediate action. That's just for committee. It has to come out to council for a formal vote, just to keep that in mind. All right, so on to item number 205, an ordinance to establish standards and limitation on future development on the South Carolina Highway Scenic Byway and matters related thereto. I think we're all extremely, thank you, gentlemen, for being with us tonight. I think we're all extremely familiar with this. We took it out of committee long enough to have a second reading. We did not have a second reading, so it comes to committee with one reading and one reading alone. There was great discussion and debate. It looks like there's a cover page that kind of goes over some of the considerations that were noted, starting with section 3 through 5, I mean. So you all have had plenty of opportunity to read over, discuss. In fact, we have debated this very ordinance that's in front of us tonight, right? This is not new from the last time we all debated, right?
Should be the exact same thing as the last debate.
Yeah. So everyone's had ample opportunity to read over it and think about it.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman.
Yeah, I had something that I asked for our clerk to print out for you guys that was sent to me by one of my constituents, and I'd seen it before, and Madam Clerk, do you mind giving them a copy of that? I had seen it before, and I, like everybody else and their brother, dismissed it. I'm looking for, oh, you've got my copy. You got my copy minus these. Okay. Huh. Is that the whole stack? Okay. So, I mean, basically, and what she's going to hand you guys is, I was really trying to do, I've been doing as much research as I can into this, because we keep talking about, we all have said, we want to preserve and protect Highway 11. That's across the board. That's on, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, it's protect and preserve. And I got to looking at this July 2014 Cherokee Foothills National Scenic Byway by the United States Department of Agriculture, a study that they did in 2014 that was for all of the counties, Oconee, Pickens, Greenville, Spartanburg, Cherokee.
How many pages are there?
And it's a lot. And as I was looking through this, it kind of dawned on me something. There are things that I'm concerned about. Like, I'm concerned about the conservation of the water. We have the cleanest water in all of North America. That's according to the folks at Clemson University. That's true. How do you protect and preserve that? How do you protect and preserve when the folks come and talk to us about clear cutting of the forest and protecting the green space? How do you protect and preserve what it looks like when we're there? How do you? Okay. How do you? What are you laughing at me? I know it's a lot.
There's a lot of pictures.
It's a lot of pictures. But the interesting thing to me about this was when I was looking at their executive summary, they broke down the recommendations on several different levels. One has to do with transportation, one has to do with ecological best practices and safety, then it's on signage, and then it's on incentives, and that incentives means who you're partnering with. And it occurred to me that perhaps we are looking at this, rather than try to come up with this massive one-size-fits-all ordinance that is supposed to solve everybody's problems on all sides of the aisle, but the stakeholders that have property and the stakeholders who care about the property and the people who live not only in Pickens County but throughout the state, who even in Greenville, who use they take pictures of Pickens County to promote tourism in Greenville. Did you know that? It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. They bus people over from Greenville County, and they all go stay in Greenville, and then they come over here and they go hike the trails. It just occurred to me that maybe we should take a look at this from what are the things that we can agree on, and then just, if it takes more than one ordinance, then we do more than one ordinance. But where do we start? And that's the only reason that, and I'm sorry that this was my this was my weekend reading that I grabbed, and as soon as I could figure out how to print it out, and there's a big thing. As soon as I could figure out a way to get it, I tried to email it to get them to print it out, and the email wouldn't go through because I'm blocked from the county website. I don't know. But it really made me think, maybe we're looking at this thing rather than try to a massive holistic approach and one massive ordinance that does one thing that we think is going to protect everybody. Should we not look at this piece by piece? Because their recommendations were multiple ordinances in here. Some things I think that even in 2014, I don't know this, but perhaps the council before us did do something, because I know isn't there a signage ordinance up there already?
Vice Chair, that predates the study, that went back probably 6 or 8 years before that.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware,
But there is an ordinance already in place for that.
about signs, yes.
Right. And there are other ordinances that are already in place that,
More UDSO protections, that's right. So like things like cell phone towers would have special scrutiny, subdivisions would have special scrutiny, things like that. They're not any different than any other part of the county.
is there anything like on a ridgeline thing?
Nothing in the county ordinance. So the 2014 study which you have here is received by the county back and no action is taken.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem with a lot of these studies. I mean, we had ACOG do a study. There's a 2014 study. I understand there's a study before that, and there's another before that. And this is an extraordinary amount of work that people have put in, and no one's taking any action. And we've been talking about trying to do something for 6 years. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you guys and tell you what my thoughts were.
All right. Obviously, it's a lot of reading, but not really.
Look at the important thing is the executive summary.
It's got the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, which is like 7 or 8 pages.
The person that sent this over also sent us in the same file form, whatever, was something from 97, 96, something like that. And one of the, I think, the consistent things that was pointed out at the last meeting by Mr. Roper was that lots of folks have been talking about this a long time. The follow-up, the follow-through, to get it done has been limited. So this was what, 2014, and 8 years went by with nobody did anything. That's, I don't think we'll be able to get away with that.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Sater.
I want to just follow up on what Mr. Costin said. There's really two things to focus on. One is the shoulder of the road, sort of the, where there's a plant there or there's a store there. And then there's the view shed, which you can see 3/4 of a mile away on the side of the mountain. I think we should really tackle the shoulder and the shoulder of the road and the corridor first, because that's what was really studied the last 14 months on this particular ACOG study. And what we spent, what most of us anyway, I spent most of my time on. When I was at the 4 or 5 meetings that ACOG had, they talked about the shoulder of the road. They talked about the 1,000-foot corridor, plus or minus around the around the center of the road. It was a 30-page report. They talked about all the tracts of land that were on the shoulder. They talked about the terrain of the shoulder. They talked about the traffic on the road, and it was really about the structures within that shoulder or the corridor. So I think we should focus on that. When you look at the 30-page report, they only spent about 2 paragraphs on the view shed, which is far away. I don't think we really studied that enough. So what I would like to do is focus on the shoulder of the road and do it in pieces. I think we should do that first, and then I think we should look at the view shed. The signs have been pretty much taken care of, I think, in the overall county ordinance, but I think if you wanted to add some additional signage issues, I mean, you could do a whole another round of votes on that or meetings on that. But I would focus on the shoulder because that's really what we spent the last 14 months on. So I agree with Councilman Costner that it's pieces, but that would be the first thing I would look at.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Wilson?
so the good folks in my area question the idea of doing the shoulder on, but you're talking about holistic, right? Holistic, which is longer than what we have, to me, at the time scale, and that's going to be longer than we have. Folks in my area just kept asking me, I think one of the attorneys for somebody in the back there said something about arbitrary and specious, which I thought that was only on Perry Mason that you would hear that. So I was pretty surprised when we got in here and they did that. But at the end of the day, the folks in my area using totally different language basically said the place to protect is from about 2 miles south of Highway 11 all the way to the state line. That's where folks don't, I mean, you can see up on the mountain there if somebody puts a castle or a giant, hotel or whatnot, you can see that from there. So what the folks in my area were asking me was, if we're going to go down this road with zone and overlay and do something in Pickens County that nobody's ever welcomed, which is tell folks what they can do on their properties, beyond and above the DSO, which most folks kind of feel like is benign in some ways from a development perspective, then we ought to do it in a way that protects the real asset, which is the whole mountain area. So I would be open to focusing solely on the scenic corridor, with the understanding that we would do what you just said, Mr. Costner, which is be the government entity in this county that doesn't just talk about all this stuff, but actually takes a very proactive and expansive approach to really protecting the asset. And the key thing there is, I would talk to folks that own some beautiful property with incredible views, generation after generation have lived on it, still live on it, plan to live on it. And their whole point was, with lots of their family, including mine, that moved down from the Highway 11 area, if we're going to protect our heritage and our history, protect the whole mountain region from commercial and industrial development and from wholesale cookie cutter neighborhoods. Because it's one thing to come right off the highway, which is certainly wonderful, but a quarter of a mile in, and there's a McDonald's and a in a Disney World looking suburb where everybody's wearing the same sort of khaki pants. That's counter to what I think most folks think of when they go up there and they hike up there, they hunt up there, and then they think about what that represents. Today I spoke with a fellow that was on the crew that did the surveying for the road, for the middle of the road, and I asked him what would those people think back in the day, about where we're at right now. And his point was, all those folks are just trying to survive on that land. That's why they, half of them moved to town. That's why so many of them, have moved on. But the folks that stayed had the roots to it and the willingness and the well-being associated with staying on the land. And those are the folks who are going to protect it regardless of what we do. So to push back on the development interests and keep it what we all kind of hold, I would say that the only way I can support talking about just this road tonight is if this doesn't leave our menu of things that we're working on for the next 2 years until we get it right from 2 miles south all the way up to the to the state line. And I think if we did that, we addressed the whole specious and arbitrary comment that the lawyers were throwing around, because it's not just one little select area, 1,000 feet off the road, and it doesn't just affect folks within that, it affects the folks in the entire mountain area up there and controls what everybody can do from a development perspective. And that's about the only way that I'm going to be able to feel comfortable doing this, because again, this is Pickens County, and Pickens County has not supported zoning because we're a property rights county.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point. The 1,000-foot variance was not, that was something that we did. That's not in ACOG's recommendation. That's something that you did as a part of the moratorium.
No, the moratorium is 600 feet.
Okay, well, the 1,000-foot's not in here. I don't know where the 1,000-foot came from. Mr. Hendricks, do you know where the 1,000-foot came from?
It was not in the ACOG study. That was a number that is not fixed by any means. We looked at different numbers. There was a 250-foot number, 500 number, 600 number, 1,000-foot number. So it didn't come from any particular place.
Thank
No,
you.
actually, I disagree with that. ACOG gave us a proposal, and it was 1,000 feet.
Do you have a copy of that proposal?
I don't know.
I think ACOG's was 660, so I think they followed more.
The more, did they? Okay. Actually,
Because
no,
I was looking
I-
through
I-
it right
I think-
here at the Highway 11 corridor final report, and I couldn't find the 1,000-foot.
Do you have what they did say?
Well, they talk about several things. They talk about 660 feet on Highway 18, or 700 feet. Pickens County has design guidelines in place for the 18-mile corridor. These guidelines apply to the property within 700 feet on both sides of Highway 18, control non-residential development design. Elements addressed in the regulations include signage, building facade, driveway access, dumpster screening, parking lot landscaping, and street tree planting on SC 18.
Is that Road 18?
SC 18.
Is the 1,000 feet in the proposal you gave us, Ken?
The 1,000 feet was in the first reading document, the document received, first reading.
And that was a document you prepared or ACOG prepared?
That document came from me.
Okay, so you came up with the 1,000 feet.
I used some of the numbers that ACOG talked about, but ACOG also talked about other numbers, so it was there as a placeholder.
Okay,
So it's
gotcha.
not a fixed number.
Okay, gotcha. I knew it came from somewhere. It's in some document. Do you have ACOG's proposed ordinance?
Well, ACOG's
No.
report is this,
No, but they made a proposed ordinance too. Didn't they, Ken?
That was the document you got on first reading. It was, it came about as a result of Les not meeting with ACOG. ACOG gave us a few suggestions.
Okay, so the 1,000 feet's in the first reading, but that came from you personally?
it came from that meeting.
Okay, good. That's where I thought it came from. Okay. Yeah, I saw it in some reading somewhere.
So to clarify, staff came up with 1,000 foot.
In conjunction with, there was a meeting with,
Understand?
two folks, yes.
Okay, just making sure that we know where that came from, because there seemed to be some confusion on how we came up with that number. Vice Chairman, you're in charge.
Yeah, I just realized that I'm in charge. All right, I mean, that was what my conversation, I wanted to have around the, I guess that's where you start, is we're talking about what you can see, and not the view shed. And we've lost the attorney as well. Okay. Yeah, okay. Not just the view shed. I mean, ultimately, where I hope that we're going to go is to look at all these things that people have brought up. I think are very important when you think about, like you said, what's to stop you from building a hotel on the top of whatever mountain that's 1,000 feet off, 2,000 feet off. But I think that's something that's why I kind of like this from the 2014 saying, look, and they have different ordinances in here based on the recommendations that they had. You should come up with an ordinance to do this. There should be some sort of ordinance on transportation around having a bike lane there. Now, I got it's a state highway, but you know what? We're part of GPATS. I know GPATS is talking about their long-range transportation plans as well as ACOG, but I don't know whether Highway 11 fits into which one of those, but that's certainly some things that we should try to look at. To me, the important thing is, okay, so over Labor Day, we went to visit my niece and Marines in Quantico, and we were driving back from Virginia. I could see nothing on either side of the road through the entire state of Virginia, and my son and I were talking about it, we're going, you know what, this is kind of cool. This is just, it's all trees, and I know there's stuff that's out there, but I don't see any of that.
Did you guys take the parkway?
Pardon me?
You took the parkway or you took the highway?
I watched whatever Waze told me to go. I just followed that. I have no idea.
Right. I drove the parkway from Virginia at speed once. There was nobody on the road. It was completely devoid of other traffic or whatnot for hundreds of miles, basically. What we're talking about doing on Highway 11 needs that level of detail that they put into it. And they didn't disavow any kind of growth, because you can, certain places you can see where the city's at, you take the exits or whatever, and all of a sudden you're in town. But if you take the Parkway and you look at it, I mean, it's, some of the documentation in here basically kind of spell out what the architecture they put into making sure they protected that experience that you have on the Parkway, which is certainly something that we can do. Whether or not the staff came up with 1,000 feet or not, it's a great starting point for us to have the discussion. And like I said, to me, if we're going to do the DSO, having just the view shed and as irregular as it was from the projection from the county folks, and I think that sort of misses the point. So to me, going to the state line, protecting the entire land is easy enough than defining some line that somebody created or recommended or referred to, with it just being a distance away from the road. It doesn't really accomplish what we're hoping to do, which is development standards for that region. So the DSO add-ons and things that we're talking about and preventions, pretty much the northern portion of our entire county, that kind of applies. There's a bunch of stuff that's already there. There's a whole neighborhood, the Rock neighborhood with the golf course. It's probably 20% built out, and it's been there for 2 decades. If it wasn't just for the person that recently bought it putting money into their sewer system, they were in real trouble. That, if you ride around that neighborhood, and I went toured the whole neighborhood, I mean, if you're looking for a place to build a mountain house, build in the mountains, that's a place to go. And the thing is, people move to the mountains for the views. They build in the mountains for the views, right? So, folks are going to put their houses and whatnot up in these areas that are well within 1,000, outside of 1,000 feet from Highway 11. So what are we hopefully trying to accomplish? So if we're going to do the architecture associated with a parkway, let's do the architecture associated with a parkway. If we're trying to prevent development in the interim that's going to be counter to what folks want us to do up in the Highway 11 area, if you can see it from Highway 11 because somebody put a Taj Mahal up on the hill, you've just worked against your own purpose. So I think the development standards could apply all the way to the state line. And then we satisfy that attorney's claim that we were specious and arbitrary. We protect the entire region, just like you would an industrial region. You wouldn't just pick a road in an industrial region and then say, well, you can see, it doesn't matter if you can see houses from there. It's an industrial area if you're doing zoning. So I mean, if we're going to be pregnant, let's be full-time pregnant. Let's don't be partially pregnant and only do just like a small scripted area from the road. And the fact is, there's no good time to be pregnant. If we're going to do zoning, then let's just freaking do it.
So what is
Councilman Waters.
I see a lot of your point. I think a lot of people don't understand that outside of this 1,000 feet, people can do whatever they want to do.
Right.
And put up. Now, I don't think you're going to have manufacturing up there just because the contour, the water, the sewage, it just doesn't work. And people think you're going to have something up there. I don't think that's the case. I have a problem with the 1,000 foot. I struggle with this because I feel like people need to have the freedom to do what they want to with their property. When we tell people you can only have a 5-acre parcel, what if they have a 4-acre parcel? And yeah, you can go through this and have to go through and get a variance, but the point is people ought to be able to do what they want. I think if we're trying to protect the view, I think we can look at something that in some cases it may be 50 feet or 100 feet back, and you can't see a thing past that. Someplace, a good portion of this highway, you can't see 50 foot past because there's trees all through there. So what you have is you have a tree barrier, and if we tell people you can do whatever you want to on your 5-acre plot, they could come along and they could mow all those trees down and put a big lawn there and put whatever they wanted to there. And I don't think that protects any view. I would be more in the idea of let's give a buffer, maybe 100 foot back or something like that. Now, I do like your point of looking at the whole thing, because once you go where you're starting to see Table Rock, you're looking at a much broader area, but some areas on the other end of that thing, you can't see anything. And that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. We talked about the viewscape to me is important. In some areas it may make sense that you wouldn't want to build anything, that was a half mile or a mile back, depending on what you wanted to build. In some places you go back 50 feet and you can't see anything. And so I think the arbitrary 1,000 foot, and government's really great at doing, everyone fits into the box of government. And we say, here's 1,000 foot, and that's where everyone fits, and it's great for some, and it sucks for others. And I never have much liked the way government is a one-size-fits-all. So I like the idea of having a buffer along the entire way so that you can do what you want to behind that buffer. Now, I can be compromised to do some other things with business, but I have a struggle telling people how to build houses. I have a struggle telling people you can't build it more than this high and you have to have this and that. I think you start really taking away people's rights as government telling you how to take care of your property or what to build. But if we could put a buffer that protects a person driving down the highway and say, you got a driveway and back there you can build what you want to build back there. You know, I don't think that's asking too much of the property owner to have a barrier. We've got other places we require, I mean, I'm a planning commission, we require barriers when people wanted to put stuff up. You know, just saying, we want to protect people driving down there. Now, when we get up to Table Rock, we may have to look at a bigger issue there, but at least, 100 foot back and say, okay, behind that, you're a property owner, gracious. Let's let them do it. They want to back there. You're not going to see it. If someone puts a house up and someone likes a green siding and someone else likes a red siding, I don't think that we can get into that. You talked about the granular level of governance. Then we're telling people exactly, what color their gutters are going to be.
If you don't mind, the question that comes up is, can you see it from the mountain?
So Councilman Seda had a comment or question.
I think you're both right. I mean, I think it's a two-step process. I think you have to look at the shoulder first, which we spent most of the time on, and then the view shed is going to be second, which is what Henry's mostly talking about. I disagree with you about when you start to change the corridor, you're going to open yourself up for more legal problems. I think if you read the case law, they really stress that it has to be uniform and consistent because the costs and benefits have to be uniform and consistent. It's very clear. There's 3 landmark cases. One of them's Penn Central, and they talk about that. It's got to be consistent. Now, when you start doing different corridors and zones, you're going to open yourself up for trouble.
Well,
Vice Chairman actually had something when Mr. Seda's done.
No.
I'm finished. That's fine. I just wanted to rebut that point.
Oh, no, I know what I was going to say. I remember the guy that came up and spoke. I would hate to be the grandson that inherited 3 acres of land and we're going to tell him he can do nothing with it. 3 acres of land is a lot. I mean, I'm on 3 acres of land. And gosh, if y'all did that on, Liberty 6 Mile Highway, I wouldn't be able to build my house on that land. So there's things like that to consider too.
Councilman Waters.
To the point, I think we would have a defendable position with having something because we'd have a reason why. Right now, when you say 1,000 feet, we can't even give anything other than staff put it down. If we say the reason this is 100 feet and the reason this one's 500 feet is because of this, and we can show documents that say, well, you're sitting in a car and you're driving by, you can see that. I think that's very defendable in court. And I think it's a lot more defendable than saying we're going to do the same thing all the way down the road.
So, Mr.
Councilman Wilson.
So you guys are basically arguing my point. Let's take it all the way to the state line. Everything that we can block. And the reason for that is the folks that are asking me this question, just bare bones, right? Not the over engineering it or whatnot. I can see it from the road. That's great. But if I can see it from a quarter mile over there, where we go up another 75 or 80 feet, and I can see it, or if I can see it from the mountaintop, if I can see it from the hiking trail, that's the neighborhood, the McDonald's. The issue isn't necessarily that you can see it just from Highway 11. The reason we take Highway 11 is to get up there. The cruise on Highway 11 is 20 minutes, 20 miles. It's the whole area is the view shed. But the view shed shouldn't just be measured from Highway 11 because where you're looking at it matters. So I think you guys basically, I appreciate your support of my argument.
I had a conversation with an individual, to your point, that lives on the Greenville County side. In fact, they have property that crosses the county line. Part of the family owns over here, part of the family owns over there. And they ironically didn't know much about this. They just heard rumblings. And so I had some detailed conversation with them. And, their argument was what you do with where I live or the setback where I live, where there's already natural setback, or there's already, whatever, excuse me, and they have both sides, they own on both sides of the road, which is kind of unique as well, but they physically have property on 11. Is different than, say, at right in front of the Rock, or right at 178 and 11, or their argument was it does change depending on where you are, but they felt that the spirit should be the same throughout the corridor. To your point, now, we didn't get into some of the semantics, but, I think the overall idea doesn't change, but they could understand why you would want to be more restrictive, or why you would not want to ruin what you had from 11 looking at. But if you're looking at a side of a hill, there ain't much you're going to do to ruin that unless you go in and try to take the hill down. And by taking the hill down, I'm not talking about a little berm. I'm talking about taking out one of those massive rocks that you run across or whatever. And I'm not saying nobody will do that or nobody wants to do that. I'm just simply saying their point was, that's kind of the way they see it. Councilman Myers.
I see your point. Someone sitting on the mountain doesn't want to see something down there. I have a real struggle with that from the side of a governance side, protecting somebody's view from their own house. To say that this person here can't build a house on their property because this person doesn't want to look at it. That's just, and I understand what you're saying. When you're driving down the corridor, you're talking about the public driving down there and what they see. I think we may run into an issue, at least I run into a moral issue, when the guy on top of the mountain says, well, I don't want you to build down there because I don't want to see a house on that piece of property. I want to see trees. Then he needs to buy that piece of property. If he says, I only want to see trees, then buy it. Then he can control it. But I think when we pass laws protecting his personal view from his house, I think, at least for me, it runs into a little bit more of a harder moral area and for me, a lot of this is not the legal side. Mr. Saban presented, legally, there's a ton of things we can do. There's a ton of things the U.S. government's done. To me, it's not that, it's what's morally what we should do. And that's where I struggle with all this stuff. Yes, I want to protect the view, but I also I heartburn for the people's right to do what they want to. Mr. Chairman.
Thought it was
Blazing Saddles. Remember the little city in Blazing Saddles?
Around the fire?
No, when they would ride into town or whatnot, and it was just the faces, but they showed them instead of like every other Western. Yeah. They showed that it was hollow on the backside of it, right? Your argument is against what you just said was we shouldn't do any of this. No, that's what you said, because we're talking about an individual that can live anywhere in this county that can ride up there on that property. So it doesn't matter if I can see it from my view. I can see it from my personally owned car. If I can see it from the trail up there, riding a horse. Or what you just argued against was any of it, which is honestly where I would rather be. I mean, I respect that this is an important area, and I like it. The problem with what we're doing as a whole, if you take the argument you're doing, at some point somebody's going to want us to tell people where they ought to be doing the majority of the growth in the county. And just to be completely blunt about it, that's going to be right where my family's farm's at, and the area near Croswell and over near the railroad. The racetrack. And then somebody's going to want us to do places where you can only do high-end development. There's going to be this is zoning. We're opening the door to zoning. So the argument against it is either we're pregnant or we're not pregnant. What you just said was, the moral argument is out the window when you say that there's a difference between where you're looking at it from, because there's not. If we're just instantly looking at where the corridor is at, sure, we might be able to do this development, but the long-term impact of this is we are opening the door to zoning in our entire county. And if we're going to do that, then it needs to be holistic, and it needs to, set aside. We're not setting aside the view from the guy in the car that could be from Mississippi. What about the folks from Easley, Greenville? They're here locally or whatever, that don't want to see it coming down the mountain. If we're going to do something, then we need to do something broader then we're not telling people they can't build houses. What we're telling people is they can't do the commercial and whatever. If you're going to build a house, just like with the DSO for neighborhoods already, there's just going to be some things you have to do. There's like 175 pages for the reserves rules, right? For the HOA rule thing up there. Those folks will like to go in there because they want to protect their investment. We're talking about doing a DSO amendment here because we want to protect what wasn't our investment, but is our heritage and our history. So your argument is either pregnant or not pregnant. Doesn't matter where you're looking at it from. What I'm saying is if we're going to do this zoning thing, then let's take a look at the whole thing instead of this narrow little window. Because the first thing that's going to happen when something stupid happens right around the corner is these folks are going to be back up here and they're mad as hell.
Councilman Waters.
Maybe I didn't explain myself right. There's a difference in the public riding down a road and looking at the view up from a public road, okay, and what they see versus what someone sees in their house as far as a right. When we make something to say we want to have a buffer so that all the people driving down the public highway have one thing. I have an angst when we start making rules for someone that's sitting in their house and what they get to see. Because in that situation, if you're sitting on top of that mountain, you can see an awful long way. At what point do you decide that, oh, you can't build something over in Pickens because I can see it? I think that's where I'm coming from. Not so much, you know, I'm not saying one or the other, but I'm saying when you're driving down the road is one set of standards versus protecting the person that's sitting in their own personal property and saying, I don't want to see that, so government needs to protect me from having to look at something I don't want to see. And what point are we going to say that? Well, how far can you see? Do we need to go to your house and see, well, how far can you see? And what should we do for that piece of property? That's where I struggle a little with and say, okay, well, what kind of house do they want to see? If we're going to put houses, we're going to say, well, we only want you to see this type of house, you know, or if it's maybe you can see this, but you can't see that.
So are you saying something like this versus this?
As far as what someone can see?
Yeah, you're talking about what you see. So you're saying something like this versus something like this. This is considered an inconsiderate design. This one's considered a considerate design. You can build the same structure. It's just
So that structure's over there? Is that
it's a considerate design. They built, there's trees around it, it fits in.
It's behind something. There's a buffer.
But this is what they consider an inconsiderate design. This is just straight from that
Yeah,
you have.
yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
I would guess that's a very particular situation.
No, it is, but I'm just trying to give it an example. I'm a picture person.
Yeah, in the road, the view shed of that, you'd be seeing up the top of that hill.
So just keep in mind, right, where the picture, the artist from the photograph is on another hill looking down at it, like you would if you were on a trail up in the mountain or riding in a car up on the mountain looking down. Somebody's looking across from here, not from the road here at the bottom, but from somewhere else. If we're talking about views, I mean, let's be woke here. All views count, all views matter.
I guess my point with this would be the person driving down the road, if they can see where that is, there's no buffer. The person over here sitting looking at this can't tell the person across the street on top of the hill how to build their house.
About passing that down so we all.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a point?
Councilman Seder.
I want to address the property rights issue. I think there's two issues here. There's legal issues and the property rights issue. When you think about protecting Highway 11 and protecting property rights of the landowner, I think it's a zero-sum game. You know, if you say no new manufacturing, that person that owns that property lost some of his right to build a manufacturing plant there. It's a zero-sum game. I think you can maybe find a happy balance between the two, between, you know, restricting some rights and actually protecting Highway 11. But I think either way, I think it's a zero-sum game. I came to the decision on this property rights issue pretty easily, I thought. And I'm okay with infringing on some of the rights of the owners along Highway 11, the plus or minus 1,000 feet. And I'll explain why, okay? First, the majority of the owners on 11, and I knocked many of their doors, they support giving up some of their rights to protect the scenic Highway 11. And I talked to them personally, and they told me this, so I'm okay with that. A lot of them petitioned me to actually do something about it. The second thing is, it's a scenic highway, it was designated by the state as a scenic highway. There should have been restrictions put in when it was done. It wasn't. Third thing is, the plus or minus 1,000 feet is 7 square miles of the county out of 512 square miles. It's a real small amount to designate for a scenic highway. You know, and sometimes the government has to take actions to do things like this. They'll take a bold action. And you wouldn't have places like Central Park if the government didn't take an action. And that's what happened. They took an action, and that became, they actually took that property. So I think there's plenty. Second thing is, legally, I think we're on solid ground. There's plenty of overlays that are just residential only. You can go to any county, any city, and there's residential sections, and the courts uphold them all over the place. So I think it's legal too. If anybody's uncomfortable with taking some of the property rights, I am all for eliminating the taxes on those properties or reducing them. That would somewhat equalize it. So, for those 5 reasons, I actually think that the scenic highway is an exception. I surely wouldn't do this anywhere else, but it's an exception, and I'm okay with it.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wilson.
So we, at the taxpayer time, we had the opportunity to do some training with legal experts in takings, and apparently that's what they referred to it as takings. I'll just be on record here. I'm not for taking anybody's rights away. I understand colloquially speaking what you were saying or whatever, but if you infringe on the 5th, you go to the 1st and the 2nd real quick. So the way the legal folks said the 3-part test for takings was, what is the character of the government action? Is it a regulatory, which is what we're talking about, versus a physical? Physical is a taking, right? And so you have to be compensated. The second thing was, what is the economic impact of regulation on the property owner? And I will give this to the clerk. It's from the program that we did. What is the economic impact of regulation on the property owner? So that's a direct measure, right? And I understand there's case law, et cetera. What is the extent of interference with distinct investment-backed expectations? So did somebody buy it and hold it and self-fund and et cetera, and just push off other investment and other growth and whatever? And now we're basically stepping in and saying, hey, you're basically not going to be able to recognize that. Then that's where you get this gray area distinction in the law that opens the door for someone to be able to claim that it's a taking or not. So what I heard you say basically is there's going to be a give and take economically, right? Yeah, you're going to be limited in some of the things you can do, but most likely the value of your property is going to go up. So why the folks pay the money to get into the reserve, right? Because it's protected. It's got development standards enforced or whatnot through what, in my experience, is an absolutely aggressive, program of just management, right? They make folks pay, basically follow their stuff. Their accountability is very strong because they have a bunch of retired old guys, nothing better to do. So when it comes down to it, are we taking away somebody's fundamental? Did they invest up there specific for it? People that bought it in 1940 didn't invest up there for that purpose, right? They have land. And they're passing it on. The economic impact of it is to pass it on to their children, ostensibly, whether or not they're going to sell it or not. Usually that's not the motivation. But the impact of the regulation on the property owner. So when you tell somebody with 3 acres of land that you can't do this unless you go through these wickets and whatnot, you're not taking away their right because you're giving them due process to go in to petition against it. So we're giving them that opportunity in anything we do on that regard. And then the character of it, for sure, we're not taking it from them. They'll still possess it, they'll still own it, they'll still have access to it, they'll still be able to do things to it. They may be regulated in some way. When you come back to the investment-based expectations, right? That's an area where we're certainly going to have to address that so that it's not an issue from my perspective. Because if you've owned that land for the purposes of agriculture, and then we're going to tell you what you can do, but you have to do X and you can't do Y, or if you've owned that land for the purposes of timber, and if you go to the horse pasture, it's terraced because the big old growth trees came out of there, 100 years ago, 80 years ago. The trees that are there now are most of them at the end of their extended life as far as what a longleaf pine can live, right? Well past it in some cases. That's why there's the fire hazards that we saw with the Pinnacle fire. So ultimately for me, where it comes down to just the test for the for the constitutional rights is right here with this, what is the extent of interference? With distinct, not, I might possibly do that, but distinct plans for investment-backed expectations. So somebody's been for 10 years now exchanging emails about their greenhouse business that they're going to put up there, there's a distinct investment associated with that. If somebody's engaged with legal folks and attorneys and architects, et cetera, for the purposes of some sort of whatever, then we're interfering with that. For us to come in and say, hey, you guys have to do the downlighting for the, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's no reason that the corridor is special. We can do it in the entire area because it's just a development standard and we already have them. We're just amending and adding to those. But when we go in and we say, for this 1,000 feet, you can't do X, Y, Z, et cetera, that does pretty much arbitrarily point that specific space out in contradiction to the idea that the entire area is what's important to folks in the community. So to me, the duality here is unclear. If our motivation is to protect it, history and heritage, it's the whole area. The whole area north of Highway 11 is the area. And for me, the ultimate test of being a competent politician, particularly in Pickens County, is that we do not get engaged in zoning that's arbitrary and capricious to the point where when we start coming back again and start talking about where are we going to do the growth in the county and then where are we going to do the medical facilities. And remember the guys that didn't want us to have behavioral issue, people with behavioral issues put into a house in his neighborhood. When we come back to that discussion, if we're just seat of the pants in this thing, which 1,000-foot barrier is, to me, it's going to undermine our credibility with respect to what's going to be some tough decisions and some important decisions, because we're setting these things and it's going to be a long, long time that they're going to be applicable for my purposes, for my life, forever. So let's be careful about the investment back to expectations of folks. The folks that have had the land for a long time, different folks that moved here as a retirement and might only be here 7 to 10 years until they get to the point where they go to a home. Those folks are going to want their property values protected, and they're going to want their access to it protected. They're going to want their ability to sell it protected. If that's the cycle. You move to where your retirement place is at, then you move on to the next step in your life. You have to be able to sell it. So we have a huge population that we could interfere with very quickly. So for me, that's the three things. I want to go that again. I want to be careful with the zoning piece of it because we're opening the door for zoning, and we're going to have our back against the wall around the rest of the county if we don't treat this place as a broad region versus that one little strip. The second thing is we got to be careful about folks that have invested, and there's a lot of different kind of folks. A lot of the folks that are raising hell in here and calling us names and whatnot recently invested. They've only been here a short period of time. Because I have a business that focuses on those kind of folks, I've been paying a lot of attention to this. There's a 7 to 14-year window where those folks disappear. They take off. They're selling their properties. It's rare that I hear somebody, when I tell somebody a 35-year warranty, they tell me, I'm not going to be around that long. I'm not going to own this land that long. When I tell them 15-year warranty, they're like, maybe I'll still own it. I mean, the planning of moving here is different than all of us who have been here. So that's why I'm arguing, and it's not my idea. I'll tell you the guy's name, off the camera. Take it to the mountains. Do the whole area. If we're going to do zoning, let's do zoning. It's not whether or not somebody can see it in a different car or whatnot. It's the constitutional protections of treating everybody equally up there. If it's important, let's treat it like it's important. So I apologize. That's why I was giving the insurance guys a hard time earlier for talking so much.
We need to make up for it now.
Right?
Councilman Fincher?
Some of you described 1,000 foot as a barrier. I think of it as a 1,000-foot protected area to protect from unsightly junkyards and things like that.
We have a DSO that covers junkyards and stuff now, and I don't know how difficult it would be to put a junkyard on Highway 11 with the current DSO.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be able to do that, but I'm trying to use some extreme thing.
Vice Chair.
So I agree with so many different things that we're all saying. First, there's no one who wants industrial manufacturing development up there, period. Regardless of what I've heard other councilmen say in public, not a single person up here has said they want that.
Agreed.
That's the first thing. Second is, I have a real problem with the 1,000 feet. How many yards is that? 300? No, 2. It's getting past 8 o'clock and I can't do math.
It's a 2-minute run.
330 yards, is that right?
Yep.
Even at 250 feet, that's 80 yards. So, Councilman Whitehurst, I'm thinking about what you said, and I think about places like, and I've mentioned it before, Arabella Farms. He spoke. He said, you know, if you do the 1,000 feet, you're going to be cutting in half of my property, even though you can't see it from the road. Even though there's this big hill, and they're behind the hill before you get to the apple orchard and the farm. And that's kind of why I was saying we take it in pieces. Councilman Wilson, I do agree with you that we have to take a holistic approach, but not a holistic approach to a single ordinance is what I was getting at. In other words, we're taking a holistic approach to everything that we want to try to accomplish. And for me, it's the conservation. How do we protect and preserve not just what it looks like, but the natural resources that we have? But I have a real problem with the 1,000 feet. And the one thing that I've kept from Ms. Raines that she gave me when I first got on board was the Constitution that I keep in my pocket. And the Fifth Amendment specifically says on personal property rights. So I'm more along the lines of, is there a way that we can create something as a start if it's 250 feet or not, or a natural barrier already in place? That doesn't, at least that doesn't cut into the, how many, 80, that's 80 yards. But like I said, when I was driving back from Virginia, we couldn't see 10 yards. And if you go to the Blue Ridge Parkway, a lot of the same things that are recommended in this thing are based on the guidelines of Blue Ridge Parkway, and I don't think we should be more restrictive than the Parkway.
So I have a question in that regard. Yeah. You opened your discussions earlier talking about water quality. Water quality is watershed.
Yeah.
It's the entire area. It's all the tributaries from all the creeks leading into the rivers, leading into the lakes. And you're right, we do have incredibly high quality water. Lack of silica, lack of a lot of other things because of the way it's structured, the just natural filtering network of the mountains and the way that the water has to kind of travel and go through, and a lot of the bacteria disappears as it's kind of working its way down. We are very fortunate in that regard, but 80 feet ain't gonna cut that. 80 feet's not gonna have an effect on that at all.
250 feet.
Or
And
250 feet's not gonna
you're
affect it
right.
at all.
That's why I said we do need to take a holistic approach, but how do we take this in a step by step? Let's start with the road. Then let's talk about what are we going to do. I mean, there are things, recommendations on changing the slope. There are recommendations on if you're going to build, keeping so much green space.
Right.
But then you've got the other, you made that point about the forest, because I watched what happened with the Pinnacle Mountain Fire, and that was because they didn't cut those trees down and get all that brush out of there to solve that problem. So, I mean, because we've had people say, we don't want any clear cutting. Well, I don't want any clear cutting either, but I want to be able, how do we protect and preserve what we have? And I think we can do this in multiple ordinances, but we got to start with something.
So just my opinion. If we're gonna do a DSO amendment, and we're trying to be very specific with the region or whatnot, in the event that we have to defend that, right? It's going to be very difficult from a political perspective to come back to the table and do something in a broader area. Like Les said, we're only going to come down from where we're at, right? The negotiating the political process here. The reality of it is, though, if you want to do something for water is region. It's a region. Because the 10 acres of clear-cut land is only going to be clear-cut and cleared for 2 or 3 years before nature takes care of that issue. I mean, that's just, and honestly, probably take care of it better than it is now, because it's going to be indigenous trees. It's going to be, it's going to be what should have been there, the entire time, right? But if you want to do something to protect the water, because everything downstream of there is what's important, right? So you'll notice that the watershed, up near Saluda, it's don't come in here. Don't do this, don't do that. No motors. Don't get out of your car and pour out your cola. They're protecting that entire area because of the water quality associated with it, right? I'm not saying don't let folks build houses. Don't let them do the things that they're going to do. What I'm saying that if we're going to put development standards in here, I mean, if we're going to do this overlay, let's do the overlay over the area up there. And then it undermines anybody's argument that we just predatorily pick them out, that they're the only one having to carry the load here. And it reinforces the argument that the entire area is what's important to us. Because it's not just the road, because if everything on both sides of the road, then we're going to have a Blazing Saddles Western town. And that's not what I'm hoping to do. What I'm hoping to do is protect the feeling that you have when you come up out of Pickens and you know the nice hamburgers right up there around the corner. And then you're going to go on up to Rocky Bottom and go check out the view that Mr. Sada got to see over the weekend. You know, that's what I want to protect. You know, and so to me, that when you know there's a point when you leave Pickens, when you leave the city, and you know that you're in the sticks, right? Let's protect that. And it goes all the way to Brevard on that one road. It goes all the way up to Whitewater Falls on the other, right? And past Whitewater Falls to Cashiers. It's the integrity of all of that that really matters to me, because I have family members that had liquor stills in half those hollows, right? You know, let's protect the idea of that whole thing. A place that you can go to in a dark corner of the world and really get away from folks. You can hide your horses from the union guys if you want to. I mean, that's what we're talking about protecting. It's not just that strip of road, because I talking to the guy today, and they followed an old road that was there before. I mean, the path of that road was not as important as what we're talking about here, is the value and the character of the whole region up there.
Councilman Waters.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. Let's try to find some common ground, okay? I think, because I don't think industrial is going to get built up there.
Never.
From an engineering standpoint, it's not going to happen. So if we say no industrial development in the entire region, I don't think that's going to be an issue with anybody, okay? Because from an engineering standpoint, it won't make any sense.
Worst place on the planet to put industry.
Okay,
So finish because I got a rebuttal.
So we can do that. I think the other thing is, can we do some sort of a buffer? So what we're looking at is, let's take a buffer, maybe it's 100 feet, 150, or maybe 250, you know, depending on, and you're right, these cases where people have invested, those will be almost a case-by-case basis to see where their land is, but have some sort of buffer so you don't have someone that's going to take their front yard and just say, I'm going to rip it all out and put grass in there and put my cars in front, and, you know, so the people driving down the road have more of that scenic view. So there's a buffer behind that, okay? The only thing, I got a couple angst. Telling people how to build their houses is one, but on a commercial side, okay, I think we can, because I think there's a place for commercial businesses up there. Okay, someone's got a company they want to do rafting up there where people can go up there. Somebody wants to have a little restaurant up there that people want to eat at. There are things that can fit into the area. You know, now maybe it's not having a QT. You know, but if it was behind a barrier, it would be a little more of a, because people need to be able to get gas. You know, and maybe you could put. I would be more likely to put restrictions on the way commercial buildings are built, okay, than you would with residential, because in a commercial building, you can say, okay, we're trying to create a look for people that are coming into the area. You see this with some of these little, yeah, these little gas stations that have that wood. So a little bit more of that look, but maybe something, and I'm just talking out loud, where you could have commercial and business that fit into the area. And I don't know that we can have something like that has to be gone through the planning commission to say, like, somebody wants to come up there and say, I want to put a roller rink up here. I don't know why someone would put a roller rink up there, but you may say, well, that might not fit. But if somebody says, hey, we want to do a blueberry field for people to pick blueberries, pick your own apples, or we want to do a winery, you know, and have people be able to come through, those are popular. And be able to have a restaurant up there. So I think there's things that can contribute to the area that gives people some opportunity to do with their land and say, okay, we're not going to have any industrial manufacturing. And maybe a buffer off the road, and then let people build what they want to behind the buffer. Is any of that stuff resonating?
Yeah, that's actually, there's more in here about buffers. There's a whole section in here on buffers, but if you read all the other sections, there is a ton in here about buffers in areas not labeled required buffer. And to your point, there's actually in section 2D, all proposed development on Highway 11 must be approved by the Pickens County Planning Commission. Then, you know, that's in this, that is on the table that went out for second reading. I do have a question about industrial, because my definition of industrial may be different than your definition of industrial. Because when you're talking about a winery, and then then I get to thinking about bottling wine and to
Semi-trucks.
Okay, so at what point is it industrial? You see what I'm saying?
And like I say, I was just talking out loud, but I was just off the top of my head. I think it'd be
But
great.
if I build an industrial facility that looked residential, does it matter?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Say.
the state will determine that based on the tax rate. They determine what's industrial, what's commercial, and what's residential. That's defined under the state law.
Yeah, we'd have to reinvent that wheel. And if you don't mind, the Parkway has a clean way to do it, right? The Parkway, basically you get off the exit and pretty clearly, right, almost immediately there's civilization. And, so there's development efforts. I think that's why lots of folks have asked us, how far back from 11, right, before you can have a Dollywood? How far back from 11 or around the corner can you have a Dollywood? And you can see, right, if in the event that we preserve it and it becomes sort of a PR opportunity for the upstate to bring tourism, how many t-shirt shops can you get within a quarter of a mile of Highway 11? I think that's the issue, not for me with the Parkway, because as you're riding down the Parkway, you can, there's plenty of things you can see, and it's, it's regulated in some way, and it fits the area. But how far back? So like, right now there's commercial development at intersections. Do you just do the intersections? That way it's immediately, accessible right there. And then you have those folks meet the development standards for what they do. Like you said, no corporate, no whatever, it's earth tones, it's whatnot. It's what you would expect to see, toward the Black Forest one time, or a number of times actually. And, it still has that sort of character of, of that part of Germany, right? Versus just, kind of the wholesale, can we get your attention kind of things as a Whataburger would have. But for me, again, I think that most folks are thinking, there's a risk of industrial. When I say industrial, I mean like manufacturing, things like that. The lack of utilities, the poor, the just limited number of folks that would be up there to be willing to work at it, the logistics associated with transportation, just the risk associated with weather and whatnot. I think it's a poor place to attract it. And again, the big neighborhood up there, The Rock, has been there for 2 or 3 decades. And it ain't even close to, halfway full. It's almost every lot up there is still open to be purchased and developed. So for me, it comes back again to the goal. If we're gonna go to the trouble of editing the development standards, we do need to kind of keep in mind that if we don't have some like restrictions or some sort of a standard for housing, height, whatever, folks are going to take advantage of that, right? They're going to, it's out of character for the area is what I'm kind of getting to. So signs are taken care of. Industrial uses, we can all just easily do that, say none of it, but what it talks about here with agritourism, working farms and timber, I think there's no reason why we would ever want to interfere with those types of activities. But they can very easily turn into to a sideshow, right? And then I just don't think there's going to be that big of a draw for commercial. Why would you want to put a strip mall up there? There's no people. People aren't there to go buy T-shirts, right? And then who would work it? So I think that the risks are easy for us to argue that that's not what people invested in up there. People invested in land with huge views so that they could put McMansions on it. That's the real development issue that we're really at risk of here.
Councilman Waters.
I kind of like the idea of the commercial at the road intersections. As far as having that for stuff like gas stations and then having fit into that. I don't know if anyone's going to build any 4-story houses up there. I've been up in a lot of mountain places.
Man, have you been in the reserve? Have you been into the cliffs communities?
There's only 4.
There are more four floor housing you shake a stick at. As a fat man, I notice how many floors houses have, right? Let's just be honest here, right? It's something that draws my attention. It's remarkable the number of houses on those hills.
Well, I guess I struggle with telling people how high or how big they build their house. That I'm going to struggle with. I'm good with can we come up with a number maybe for?
One thing I was going to, you made me think of this because I read this in here. These are the recommendations from 2014. Complement existing rural character. In other words, if you're going to build something, it has to complement the existing rural character. And that's everything, if we were talking about a barn or a greenhouse or a roadside stand or they even got, Pumpkin Town listed as a place. But, how do you, if you're going to build something, cool, build what you want to, but you got to complement the existing rural character of the area.
I would do that for commercial.
That's what I'm saying.
But for residential, I have a hard time.
I agree. I don't think residential is something that, again, I go back to the guy that has 3 acres of land that's not gonna be able to build anything if we make this one house on 5 acres. And I do like the idea of a buffer, the idea of protecting what you can see there, and then the holistic nature of what are the things we can agree on, the industrial. I think if you're gonna, I think you can put guidelines in there on, if you are going to do something, you gotta have so much green space as far as development. That will take away the ability to do a bunch of little houses.
So if you don't mind, Versailles, Tennessee, I think it's Tennessee, up near the Bourbon Corridor, there's a castle, and everybody in the entire area hates the castle and the guy that built the castle, right? But he built it to their development standards. And so the day when I was talking to the guy that mapped that thing out of there, I was talking to him about that, right? So we know we're gonna have some standards, and I said the argument is whether or not we tell folks what to do with their housing, and so like you said, complements the character, right? And he said there's a whole bunch of mobile homes up there, and folks in our community have no problems living in mobile homes. So what if it's just a whole bunch of single-wide mobile homes? Does it complement the character? That's his opinion. If you don't do something, then you're going to get, human beings are human beings, right? If you don't have some sort of something, you're going to get something that you don't want.
So once again, I think that struggles with me. If we have a barrier and they want to build whatever they want to as far as a house behind that barrier, if they want to put a mobile home, because that's what they can afford and that's what they want to live, and they buy that land, I'm gonna have a hard time telling them, oh, no, I don't think that's good enough for what we want you to have. And that's just me. But if it's behind a barrier, then they have, in my mind, they can do what they want to behind that barrier because it's not going to affect you. Now, if a guy builds a 50,000 square foot castle, I may hate it, but gracious, I hate to step on tell him what he can't. It's no different than telling the person in the mobile home you can't put a mobile home. You're just telling this guy you can't build it. You can't build it too big or too small. I like a barrier, and I'm thinking, like 100 foot back, because I think that mostly would go. And then behind that, residential, they can do what they want to do. And then if we don't have any industrial, and then I like your idea of commercial on corners of roads coming intersect.
They are designed that way anyway.
Yeah, and then to fit the community, and then for any other businesses, something that will go through like the planning commission or something to sit. Does it fit and this just becomes a very tough thing because the planning commission's got to follow the standards, and so we got to have enough direction in the standards so that they get a flavor. We can all go tell them what we want, but 5 years from now, all they have is that to look at. So we got to put some thought into, and that's kind of where I am on it.
Other comments?
I just want to make a comment about the 3 acres. If you put a 5 acre minimum and it's an existing lot, that owner's not going to be able to do anything with that property, right? Let's say it was no manufacturing, no commercial, no subdivisions, but residential, 5 acre minimum. He wouldn't be able to do anything. He would go to court and he would argue that I have no use for this property. I have no reasonable return. He would cite Lucas and Coastal Carolina, and it would be a taking. We would have to give him a variance. So that's not going to happen. Those variances would probably be given automatically, I would imagine. And about the reasonable backed expectations, it's what you have at the time when you buy the property, what a reasonable person would expect over the life of that property. Now, so if I buy a property in 2006 on a scenic highway, is it reasonable for me to assume that I'm going to be able to build on that property whatever I want for as long as I want without the government changing the rules? That's not reasonable. I don't think a judge would support that. The county's going to argue that for 3 years now we've talked about this, and it's not reasonable expectations to assume on a scenic highway there's nothing ever going to change. So they'd have a hard time arguing that this was a reasonable expectation. It may have been their expectation, but it has to be the reasonable expectation.
Councilman Waters.
I just don't think it's a reasonable expectation to think you can stop everything on Highway 11.
You could, under the law, I mean, not everything, but you mean under what I'm proposing?
Yeah, you're just basically saying, all we're gonna do is allow 5-acre plots, and then you gotta go to somebody to go to court to change that, you know, and telling people somebody's got 10 acres and they got 3 kids.
Well,
You know,
what
then they
would
gotta go,
happen-
well, I gotta go, and it just becomes telling people what they can do once again. Well, I just go back to this idea of just having some kind of a buffer and saying, then behind that, if you want to put 3 mobile homes on your property, you can.
How would you enforce the buffer?
Well, that's because when they build, they got to get a permit, right?
And then,
Okay.
and then he cuts everything down, then what?
No, well, then you have repercussions on it, just like anything else.
You can't plant a tree, you can't cut a tree, you can't grade it down, it is there.
So if you don't
Okay.
mind, so the Duke folks and the Corps of Engineers have what you're talking about, they have buffers, right? On Lake Hartwell, they have the buffer, so the core line was prescribed when they designed the lake, et cetera. And, I mean, just to be open with, it's a federal government, you have to go to their court, right? And they say you can't cut trees down, you know, and what the property owner's been there for a long time say, they'll tell me to replant trees, and you don't gotta be good at replanting trees, you just gotta show the receipts for planting those trees. So the thing is, and this is one of the attorneys or somebody talked about, the setbacks from the road can be like 40 to 50 feet. That's standard. That's like customary. So that's something that you can say, okay, you can only do X, Y, Z because it's from the center of the road. But going past that and calling it a buffer, is it the buffer is what you're saying is a buffer is the only area that the development standard is going to affect?
No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that the buffers across the area, the development standards are for the whole area. In other words,
So you're going all the way to the state line?
we can go I don't have a problem with what you're saying, is looking at everything up there. And I agree, if you just do 1,000 feet, then, you know, you can go behind there and do whatever you want to. I think the holistic approach is right, but my point is we put the buffer, behind that you can do what you want to as far as residential, but we're saying behind that, you still can't put industrial up.
Right.
Okay, you still can't do this. So that would be my point, is that we're still looking at for lack of a better word, zoning the whole area, where you can't go do stuff, but the buffer is just to protect what you want to do with your property behind it.
So let me clarify, if you don't mind clarifying something. With the lighting, the idea of the lighting was down lighting, and that the Corps of Engineers and the Duke folks have to have lighting that shines straight down, so that if you're up on the mountain, you're not looking at just a raw assortment of lighting, right? So what it comes down to is we're going to end up with some sort of architectural something. In the development standards we already have, which they require curves. I mean, we're both on the planning commission. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the development standard that does this and that and whatnot. But so to me, I think that I need a better definition of what you're talking about as a buffer. You're talking about like a green zone, you can just put a driveway through it?
Yeah, like trees, and you got to have a buffer of trees, okay? Now your lighting stuff, I'm in the lighting business, it's what I do. They don't make anything that's not down now.
I know, I tried to argue that with the Corps. They told me I'd have to hire a lawyer to basically argue my point.
They can't, there's nothing out there to produce. Everything is dark sky compliant now.
Right.
And to Mr. Sada's point, we can't make a rule based on somebody breaking it, because they could break any law. You could say, what if they cut the trees down? Well, what if they come out there and decide, I'm gonna tear this whole thing up? You can't make the rules assuming that, well, what if they break it? You gotta make the rules to enforce the rules, okay? And you can't make the assumption, well, what if they break it? There's a penalty for it.
That's not my assumption.
Yes.
Now, my assumption is that it's a county rule. Guy builds a house, goes to planning commission, your buffer has to be a certain amount, right? Okay, he says, fine, he builds a house. Sells the house, new guy comes in, cuts the buffer down. Now, what's gonna happen? I can tell you what's gonna happen. Nothing's gonna happen, because it's happened oodles of times, and I've literally, let me finish. Okay, so what's gonna happen? Nothing when that buffer gets cut down. Unless somebody files a complaint to the county and is after the county to do something about it, nothing's going to get done. I've done it, Trey. Let me finish. There's signs on Highway 11 that are illegal. I've gotten complaints. If I didn't go in and complain and get after the planning department month after month, those signs would still be there. Most of the time, people aren't going to do that. So it's not that people are going to break the law. It's just that they're going to break it, and it's not going to be enforced. So I don't want to rely on enforcement.
Well, Vice Chairman has something to say. Go ahead.
But they could do the same thing with a 1,000-foot buffer. It doesn't change it.
No,
they could say, okay, I got 5 acres, I'm gonna clear cut the whole thing. And under your situation, they could do that. I mean, they could still
You're
do it.
arguing for the buffer, not me.
I know, but if you said 1,000 feet, they can't do anything in that 1,000 feet, right? But they can build a house in there, right?
They could build a house.
And they could clear cut the whole front yard.
Yeah, under my
So,
plan, they
so
could.
they could clear cut the whole thing. So under your standards, that's totally acceptable.
It is. Versus a manufacturing plant or a
No,
subdivision.
no.
or
Versus
commercial.
Let him,
No,
Councilman Slater, let
versus
him.
having something that, so what I'm saying is put a buffer there. What you're saying is, no, you can just tear it all down. I would say that, I would argue that what I'm doing is actually protecting the view more. You know, what you're saying is that 1,000-foot buffer, you can put a house in there, but if you want to clear cut your 5 acres right up to the highway, you can do that.
That's true. But
Yeah.
I'm also saying,
So
but
that
I'm also,
that doesn't protect any view. I get to drive by and look at their house, or their trailer, or their cars, or whatever they want to put in their front yard.
Councilman Slater.
it protects it from manufacturing, it protects
We're
it
not
from, let me
arguing that,
finish. Manufacturing, and it protects it from commercial, which is the aim. Most people are not gonna, in residence, are not gonna clear cut to the road. Most of them don't. They don't. I lived up there for 15 years. So I'm gonna take that risk. I'm gonna take that risk on it. You're right, it's a little bit of a weakness, but what I'm after is no commercial, no manufacturing, no subdivisions. That would get taken care of under my plan.
My conversation was not about commercial or industrial, okay? It was about a house there.
Yeah,
Like I said, that's what I've been saying is I'm okay with having houses there, okay? And not having industrial development there. I'm not talking about industrial, I'm talking about a house.
and commercial and subdivisions.
So,
Councilman Wilson.
so guys, it's been a long time since I read the development standards, and it says right here, can use existing USDO language for buffers. And I just want to be completely clear about it. At no point will I vote for anything that lets folks just clear cut right down to the road. I think I mean, we're just wasting our time here, wasting all these folks' time. That doesn't, I'm not voting for that. But on the buffers, what does the DSO say that we can do on buffers?
So the way the DSO is, and I can't give you the exact measurements, but it's a variable buffer. So if a developer comes and says, we want to put something that is going to be set back 100 feet off the road, then it'll have a class, what's called a class 5 buffer. So they've got plant plants or retained plants of a certain density. If they want to get closer, then it would go up to a class 3 buffer, so it would have to be denser plants. So that's the way the DSO does it. The more narrow the buffer you're requesting, the more heavy the plant material it's got to be.
So we can assign that to this particular, to the corridor or to the entire area up there.
And what you can also do with a buffer is you can say, I want this buffer to be no construction, no cutting.
Right.
Or if you do remove plants, then you put natural native plants back in there. So you could put a board of what you're referring to as a buffer. You don't have to follow what our DSO is now. You're doing a new thing. So if you want to do a buffer that says 250 feet or 100 feet or whatever number you come up with, you say you don't want anything disturbed there, you can do that.
Okay, so can I make sure I understand? I think that what you were saying is buffer, and I was thinking 1,000 feet was the buffer, right? That the development center would apply to it, but I was thinking there's a buffer. So I think that from what he just said, scenic, whatever, special zone.
Dr. Wilson,
or
let me explain it so I can sort of put it in words, because Mr. Rowe and I listening over here, we know that we're going to be charged with writing down what it is you guys are talking about, so we're trying to get it clear. What I think I hear you saying is that you are, you're discussing, is that you have a buffer of some distance. The numbers that I've heard are not 1,000 feet, but 100 feet or 250 feet, but a buffer where there would be very little, if any, development. If you cut trees down, you're going to replace them with artificial, that type of identity. After that, instead of going 1,000 feet where you would have design and restrictions on different pieces of property, you're talking about going all the way to the North Carolina border.
So it's not an arbitrary area.
And so we have a much bigger zone. What my other question would be is, are you also talking about going south to the 250?
2 miles is what he said.
2 miles south to the border? Is that what we're talking about?
I rode that with the most opinionated human being that I ever met and asked him what he thought, and his argument started around 2 miles every time.
So to focus council's discussion, if you're you're talking about a buffer, define it for us. How wide is that gonna be? And
Okay.
also define the overall overlay, where that would be.
All right, so minimum, center of the highway, Highway 11, back some distance. The reason why, and I understand the guy's point. At about 2 miles out, that's where the character of the whole area really kind of starts, going back towards Pickens, coming back from Pumpkin Town. It starts to really materially change just from the view, the character of it, blah, blah, blah. So to me, that's why, it could be different. Yeah, we can all go up there and come up with something that meets each person's expectations. But the industrial, the commercial piece of it, limited by these particular restrictions that you guys have given us, right, all the way to the state line. And then south of that. So we have a protected region of our county that basically limits things to residential, like you said, and then residential that has some guidelines on it for not being seen from the road. I honestly thought that we were arguing whether or not the 1,000-foot, applicability area was a buffer or not. So I think that what you guys are talking about is great. A very intensive area right in front of folks' homes so you can't see it from the road, which I think most likely would cover even my argument earlier about can't see it from the back.
So Councilman Wilson, just for clarification, because I feel like now, and I didn't catch this, but we're using buffer to mean a couple of different things, to your point. When I think of buffer, I think of shrubs and trees and red tips and leaning cypresses and, that kind of stuff, right? And it sounds like buffer is being used as a setback, is that?
I think that what we're talking about is indigenous plant species, for a distance from the road. If you got holly, you leave holly, whatnot. There are some things in there where you're going to have to let people clear a little, cut some things down. So it has to be smaller than a certain thing or whatever. There's some, the Corps is investing probably trillions of dollars into writing their requirements, so you guys have somewhere to start from. But it's not onerous, right?
So you're almost saying take 3.8, which talks about limitations on parking lots, and find a way to make it applicable to a residence or a building.
The buffer area, I think he's got it.
Yeah.
So you can't see it from the road unless you're really studying it, right? Like they do in Cary, North Carolina.
We just saw.
Is that every road that's up there, or is it just Highway 11?
North of Highway 11.
Okay, could you just give me, just tell me exactly what you want again, just step by step.
We're talking about a lot of road, but we're not talking about a lot of areas of developable land, right? But for me, the zone where you would have to do a buffer like this would be, some southern proximity to Highway 11, all the way up to the line. And honestly, most of that's state-owned land anyway, and a lot of those roads are cutting through state-owned land to get the developments that are already there, that already have standards, that we would all be happy with. So I would just say from some proximity of Highway 11 south all the way to the state line, we're talking about you have to build, if you're doing residential, you have to build with a buffer.
And to clarify, I think because there's several roads, and we don't know how far back, and that's something we gotta kind of look at before we jump into it, but I'm thinking 100 foot would about cover everything, just as a start, because some of those roads may be a little smaller, and that maybe we gotta be kind of careful of that, but I like the idea of untouching it. In other words, it's not a matter of building a thing. You got to leave that alone. And if you do have to do something for wherever you have to, for whatever reason, then it's got to be indigenous stuff back there. Then behind that, you can put in residential, okay, how you want. And then we're not doing any commercial or any industrial, okay? Now, the commercial, I think having something that fits into the area, we got to come up with some ideas on stuff like that. But for the little gas station convenience stores, I like the intersections of roads because that's where they would come anyway. That's an option to do there.
And put it on the feeder roads also.
Yeah.
So you're saying,
What'd you say, Mr. Rubin?
I was just saying that's what you're talking about there is some commercial, something off of a random road up there would have design standards on it. So you gotta make that commercial property look like a street.
We put the design standards on the commercials, but not on the houses.
So let me understand this. You had a buffer that we're talking about, and you have an intersection of, say, 178 and Highway 11, a major intersection. And they class them as 1 through 5 as the class for roads, the busier. That's what it is. So if you're talking about the busier roads, if you have commercial at that intersection, and I'm using 178 because that's the one I can think of right now, I know it's busy. Are you excluding that from the buffer?
Yeah, because an intersection you have to, I think.
For an intersection, so you want an exclusion for the intersections from the buffer, and that would be,
170.
basically so that commercial type development.
Right, and, yeah.
I have a question for you on that.
Design restrictions.
So Cary, North Carolina, and Fuquay, Varina, you know, unlike, kind of like Hilton Head in some ways, you have to have bushes and whatnot in front of the commercial, right? So they have a no signs thing, they have whatever. So at the intersections, just, you know, it doesn't have to be greened out, right? Even, I mean, people can see things that they don't like to see in certain ways. But so the choice would be whether or not you put some sort of a little green, you know, green barrier or whatnot in front of the commercial, because if you ride around Cary, North Carolina, you don't see the Walmart until you pull into the Walmart.
You can't find it like in Hilton Head. If you go down there, by the time you find it, you're already past it, or you've run into something.
But that's one of the more organic things about Hilton Head, though, right? You know, you have that experience of sort of being still on an island. So, would you guys want there to be a barrier or not?
Well, I was going to say, Councilman Seda, before we go down that path.
I want to just be clear on what you're saying. So let's say a mile or two south of Highway 11 to the North Carolina border. If there's residential, there has to be a buffer of about 100 feet so from any road. Okay. There'll be no industrial at all in the whole area. But commercial, that's my question. Is commercial allowed everywhere?
What I would, and this is just, I'm just thinking, if it's all right for me to
Well, just,
address.
it's your plan. Let me tell you.
Is I like the idea of being able to have commercial, like a, if someone wants to put a gas station at an intersection where there's, you know, people got to have stuff up there. I think we have some standards of what we're looking at for commercial, agro-commercial, something like that. And every commercial building has to go through the planning commission.
Where is it located? Is it you can have commercial throughout the whole area?
I think when we have the whole area, I think the whole area becomes underneath that as to what you can do in that area. So it's not a question of saying, we're going to do.
I think he's asking about, is it every intersection or is it just like state road intersections?
Is it every inch of the area?
For what?
Commercial.
Party? Okay. Yeah, because I think we're regulating the whole area. In other words, any commercial you want to put.
So if I want to put a McDonald's at the corner.
Let him finish, though.
Anything that's going to be like at the intersection of those things you want to do, okay, you can do, and we can specify what type of commercial business. Any other commercial would have to be something agricultural that fits in, something that fits into the thing that we would be able to run past a planning commission.
Commercials at intersections only.
But major intersections?
Not,
I apologize.
not necessarily, okay? Because let's say someone wants to put a apple orchard up there for people to come to. You can't do that at an intersection, but that's a commercial business, okay? If somebody says, you know, I want to make a honey factory up there or bee something, you can't do that at an intersection. You know, people could have ideas that could be great things that would fit into the area up there that we hadn't even thought of.
But when the guy says, I want to put a McDonald's there,
So Dr.
That's
Wilson,
a different
So
conversation.
Dr. Wilson had it.
how do you stop him?
Gentlemen.
That would be a
Mr.
different
Wilson,
thing.
we've all been respectful now. Mr. Wilson.
So what he's talking about is a clear concern for me. If there's a way to game it, you have an intersection right now that's just minor road, et cetera, but it's an intersection. But if you think about just the number, for me, the 3 or 4 main roads, coming up to the Pumpkin Town Opry, that intersection's already got commercial.
That's a
178 already has commercial. It's already existing commercial there. And then a little bit further down,
New Hope Road.
there used to be a store up there on the hill or whatnot, and then there's like, you know, a milled rock behind it. You've got some spaces there. They've already have existing commercials, so since you're already going to have existing commercial, it'd be the place. But at the end of a 2-lane road, you know, that's always been residential, and there's only 3 houses on it and a creek, I think that we have to kind of be specific. You can do commercial in that little space, set back, you know, from a distance, you know, whatever we want to say it is, you know, 1/8 of a mile back from the intersection or whatever it is, or it has the property and whatever has to be in contact with it. No multi-store stuff or anything like that. It has to be, you know, whatever limits you guys want to put. But right there at the major intersections where there's existing commercials, so that we're not adding more commercial. We're just saying, okay, this is an area where they're already stopping at the store to get a hamburger and get some gas. So if there's something on all 4 corners there, then, you know, then it's not going to take away from it because you've already got an Exxon station sitting there.
Here's my question for you guys. So the debate is around the extremes. Is there a way to, when you're, I think of commercial up there, and I'm thinking of the things that Councilman Whiter's thinking. I'm thinking a guy's got a barn on his yard and, tucked back in the woods, and he wants to turn it into a wedding venue. Cool, that's commercial, not affecting anybody, it's not gonna hurt anything. But if the Dollar General, and I'm sorry for Dollar General if they get to see this and hear that I'm talking about them, or whoever, is there a way to create limitations on things, on businesses like that, where they're just gonna put up a box store or whatever?
One thing you could do,
Well, the jockey line,
is to have your buffer, okay, where there is no development,
right?
right? Have your intersection where you get rid of the buffer, okay? If you have, the commercial development that you're talking about on the other side of the buffer.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
You can do it, but you're not getting rid of the buffer at the intersection.
No, I get that, but what I'm asking is there a way to put limitations or restrictions on what could actually be defining commercial? Because my definition of commercial is different than Councilman Sada's definition of commercial, because we're going to the extremes on talking about both sides. I agree, I don't want Dollar General up there or another whatever.
Well, one of the, you could have designs on what it is. Okay, so you would have, what you're talking about is bright yellow and black neon signs. You could exclude that, right, for commercial. You could have it so that you can't see it from the road. There
Can you say you can't have chain stores? Can you say those kinds? You can't say that.
You can say it has to have certain aesthetics.
Okay.
Like Helen, Georgia, you can do the same things that Helen did, right? So everything there has to have this sort of, Southern German kind of a feel to it, even the Burger Kings and whatnot. But I think that, from a commercial perspective, they've already given us the limitations, right? You can do ag business and work in farms, like you said, with the, apples and whatnot, and timber. And under agribusiness, the book is this thick, right? It's 2 inches thick about ag business is. The state will pay for signs. The state would help us PR this thing with funding that's already there. And when you look at what ag businesses are, ag businesses would fit right in the wheelhouse of what we're talking about for that area. And think about it, right down this road, Holly Springs, right? Those guys are doing these courses for mountain living, et cetera. You've got Haygood on that same road. You've got this heritage corridor leading up there, right? That could be incredibly strong for us and preserve what we want to preserve about our history or whatnot, but also be a tourism mecca. So the agribusiness piece is the part that really opens the door for us to still have that same feel, that same sort of a climate, that same atmosphere, and then make it a place that people want to come to specifically because it's still so, it's a mountain region, right? And it's protected. And so, a wedding venue, right? There's nothing more ag than the farmer's daughter.
Okay, so I do have a question, and we're way over on time, and we've had great discussion, but I do have a question to your point, Vice Chairman. And I think, and even, I'm going to use the McDonald's analogy that Councilman Sada used. Do we care what's in there? Do you care if it's a McDonald's versus a Dollar General versus a wedding venue, if it all looks identical?
Some folks have a feeling that they do. People want to criticize the Dollar General because of the character of the convenience that it's offering folks, right? But when it comes down to it, as long as it meets all of our standards, right, and it's hidden and it has that aesthetic that we're looking for, I think that what will rise to the top is the businesses that have the best potential for aligning their brands and their product offerings to the character that we're trying to keep for the whole region.
I guess my question is, from a non-dictatorship, from a basic governance level, if we're trying to protect the view shed, do we care what's in it?
I do, but not at the intersections because they're already commercialized. If we focus, like you can build whatever heck you want to right here at this intersection, but the commercial everywhere else has to be ag or working farms or timber. I think that's our best chance of keeping it from being a Dollywood, a Pigeon Forge.
I agree. I do agree with that. But when we're talking about a Dollar General versus a gas station, does it matter?
Not at the intersections.
I don't think so. As long as so we can make them the standard of the building to fit into it, so it's a little more natural. And we can also say that all the commercial would have to go through the planning commission for approval, and we just give some guidelines and say, and some general guidelines. We're trying to protect the view. I don't think you can have a McDonald's build way up on top of the mountain, because they're too smart for that. You know, they have very strict guidelines on that. Now, you may find, honest to goodness, a Dollar General that wants to go to an intersection someplace, but if the Dollar General looks and fits the look without all the, you know, it fits into what we want, they're doing it because there's a demand for it. You know, but if it's at those 4 intersections, like you said, does it, you know, now people may get mad at me for that, you know?
I think he's asking for clarification, is if it's behind the buffer, do we care if there's commercial all down the road?
No, that wasn't what I was asking at all.
That's not what you're asking?
That wasn't what I was asking at all.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm not really clear. Are you saying that commercials only at intersections or everywhere?
No, I'm not saying that. That is not my feelings on it at all.
Just make that clear.
I think that there is the argument that I've heard, certain things only at intersections make complete and total sense, but you can't put a barn wedding venue at an intersection and say that's the only place you can have a barn wedding venue. I don't think that makes sense.
So it's commercial everywhere then?
You would have to open, by definition, you would have to open commercial everywhere, by definition.
But
You don't have to. But
Let's ask
my
Les.
thoughts
Oh, I got you.
are,
Okay.
that's my moral,
Okay.
that's my.
Okay, Henry said intersections only.
we're talking 2 different types of commercial, okay?
Okay, what are you talking about?
Like at the commercial intersection, there's going to be a lot more leeway of what you can put at the intersection. Any commercial beyond that, there's going to be restrictions, okay? And guidance from the planning commission and what we want to categorize the
So you
stuff.
could put the dollar store anywhere on 11 as well?
No, it would have to be it would have to fit more into what our guidelines are for the type of industry we want up there, okay? So in other words, we would be able to say, we want more ag things, more this, where Dollar General wouldn't fit into an ag thing, so he couldn't build up on the side of the mountain, but he could build at the intersection.
Okay.
So my understanding
Is that-
the character
is
of
that what I'm saying?
design would be different at an intersection as opposed to behind the buffer.
Right.
No, but what he was,
In the spirit of commercial, I think is what he's saying.
I think what he was saying was that you would have to allow the wedding venue, but not the Dollar General outside the intersection. That's what you said, right?
Yeah,
Right.
there would be some
I don't
guidelines
know
on
if you
what
can
you.
do that.
Well, I think we draw the design behind the buffer differently than the design around the intersection.
Right.
No, but I'm talking about whether it's
And then council would look at that,
okay.
and you could determine how you wanted that to work. You could see how.
We could zone it differently.
You
Dr. Wilson.
You guys have been giving us the idea that we can limit things to agribusiness and working farms. If it's a wedding venue, it's not going to be a wedding venue, you know, with a marble atrium like you would get, you know, in some swanky place in a big city. It's going to be a barn. It's going to have some sort of an ag component associated with it, right? And most likely not just a wedding venue. It's going to be an events venue, and people would come and do the things that you would want to do. To me, just from these guys telling us that we can limit things, right, to the ag businesses, because we don't want to lose that right, and we had the guy speak about it. If you can get the planning commission to believe that your Dollar General is only going to, I mean, you could, okay, that leads us to what you're asking. Could you put the Farm-A-Lot, or whatever they call it, the tractor supply, up there, right? Could you put that behind a buffer? That's the argument. That's a commercial retail facility, right? It's not an ag business. It's a commercial retail facility. They'll sell T-shirts or whatnot. So to me, the corridor is limited to just these 3 things that you can do for commercial. The barrier would be right there at the major intersections where there's already kind of commercial development.
Vice Chairman.
The only other thing I was just thinking of, because I have a car working on. Sorry. And I mean, what if a guy has his own, body shop that he's got tucked back in the woods, way back? I mean, the buffer, you can't see it, but he's working on cars. And he wants to do that. He's turning his personal property into a way to do some business, to make some money. There are things like that that you don't want to negate either. Taking away people's personal property rights
That's a good point.
is something that I really, I don't want to do a land grab at all. I get the buffer, and I get the commercial on the sides, and I get saying there are standards you have to meet. We need to define those standards so that the planning commission can go, these meet the standards or they don't. And that needs to be thorough and very thought out. The agribusiness needs to be a part of that, but we've got to be careful about what people come up with for, you know,
We can't predict.
their business. All of a sudden, you've got two teenagers who've decided to start a T-shirt company out of their garage, and they get a business license, and they're breaking the law because they've created a commercial business.
If they put it behind the buffer, you're talking about hotels. If they put it behind the buffer, you're talking about whatever. And I think that what we're talking about is preserving the character of the area, and the character of the area is not whatever. The character of the area is ultra rural and country.
Can I know it's getting really late. Can we come up with an agreement to give you guys some direction?
I was about to ask, it's almost 9 o'clock, which is almost an hour past our end time. Is there any action that anyone, or is there a motion to follow tonight?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. And I hope this, and I think this is a joint motion.
We'll see if we get a,
See if we can get what I'm trying to say.
One thing before council makes a motion, if I might, I understand what you discussed, and I think that we can come up with a framework that will lead to further discussion so you can hone the points that you're talking about. One of the issues that the administrator provided to you was the creation of a conservation bank. Is that something you would want us to add to this?
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. Could the conservation bank help folks that don't have an pre-existing buffer fund the opportunity to put the buffers in the event that they chose to do that? Could there be grants associated with that kind of an activity?
Yes, it would be through the purchase of easements or the creation of easements, but yes.
Or I'm talking about, like, can it help, grant potential for, buying the indigenous, plant species for that particular purpose, that kind of thing?
I think you can get wide-ranging enough to do that, yes.
Okay.
so can you add that to part of what we want?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make that part of the amendment to add that. And I guess what I'm talking about is I'm not moving to take this out of committee. What I'm moving to do is for you guys to add a land bank, look at a 100-foot buffer where you don't touch anything you do have to for getting in, you got to put indigenous plants. We're looking at no industrial and residential. They can do what they want to, at least for starters. I know there's going to be some pushback on that, but we are looking at the entire everything to North Carolina on one side and 2 miles, but I would like to see a map of what that 2 miles looks like going back the other way. And maybe, do we want to go so far as to say commercials at the intersections at this point?
For me, the
I'm
three things
asking
that you
for
just
your-
mentioned would be, best practices for the buffer, the setback coming back towards the city, and then for the commercial stuff at the intersection.
Commercial intersections, and then maybe some guidelines for commercial behind the buffer of some ideas and thoughts that we could give to a planning commission. And once again, we have Mr. Costner brought up, which was an excellent point, is once again, what if somebody wants to do a garage? There's some issues there we got to flow through. Does that sound about like what, for at least a start?
I have a motion. Do I have a second on his motion?
Second,
All right, discussion on that motion.
Mr. Chairman. So I would like to amend the motion to take the 100 feet piece of it and look for best practices on the buffer. So just best practices on so we're not basing it on just some whim from you guys, right? Because it could be $150s, whatever,
Okay.
there could be whatever. So just for me, the term
Want
best
to
practices.
amend your motion?
Yeah, I accept it as that is, yeah.
Okay.
We're just, we're conversing.
All right.
Yeah.
Discussion. And that's what you guys are going to bring back to us. Any conversation?
Mr. Chairman, I want to talk about this, just a second.
That's good.
Okay, Mr. Sada.
Yeah, what I spent the last 18 months looking at was the shoulder of the road. That's where I spent my time. This is a massive area, which is probably thousands of tracts of land. The notion that we're going to pass this in 6 weeks is just mind-boggling. I think it's too much. We should have done this months ago. I understand what you're trying to get at. You're trying to get the shoulder and the view shed. I would do one thing at a time. Shoulder first, than view shed. Most people aren't gonna know you're doing this on December, whatever, when it's passed. They're not. It's gonna catch them blindly. And I just can't do that. I mean, it's just insane.
I think what's going to catch people blindly is they think that you're putting 1,000-foot buffer and there's nothing going to go on behind that. The people
No,
I've
they're
talked
not. No,
to
they're
did not realize that there could be a McDonald's on the other side of the 1,000-foot. They didn't realize that you could put a whole industrial plant on. You could put Dollywood up there. Our thing of the 1,000-foot does not stop Dollywood whatsoever. It's not. It's just saying within that 1,000 feet.
Yes.
You know, and the problem is that past that, you can do whatever you want to do. And I think
That's true.
to Henry's point and to Mr. Costner's point is that looking at the whole area, to protect the whole area, you know, and saying, let's just put a buffer here and allow the housing up, and then talk about how that commercial will look. Because if we go with just 1,000 foot, then we haven't talked about what can happen with commercial. We haven't talked about it all, and behind that, anything can happen.
And that's
You know, they could put a Hilton up there behind that 1,000 foot, or whatever you want. I mean, there's no restrictions at all.
I mean, Trey, I've been to every meeting, okay? And it was pretty clear that we were talking about the shoulder of the road. Okay, let me finish. And if you go just now in a 4 or 5 week thing and say, we're gonna do this whole massive area, I don't really know anybody. There was a little group that maybe talked a mile off the road and everybody dismissed it in a minute. Now this is just massive.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no way I could do it because people are gonna say I didn't know anything about it.
Well, I think that's what we're talking about.
But I think it's a good idea. I think what Henry's point was a good one. It's a 2-step process, I think, not a 1-step process. That's the only difference. You gotta do both of them.
Okay.
Vice Chair.
The motion on the table isn't to decide this by December. The motion on the table is to not even take it out of committee, but to get them to give us some language so that we can begin talking about that. I do still stand by, I would love for you guys to read through this. I do think that there are multiple ordinances that have to take place rather than one big massive one. However, I do agree that if we ignore whatever up there, then we're ignoring the water, we're ignoring the conservation of the, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know Jumping Off Rock existed until my teenage son dragged me up there, and I've lived here for 40 years.
We'll need you to resign right now.
And I know, I've been up there for a while, but I mean, I've been up there several times. But I didn't even know it existed, nor that you have a 4-wheel drive vehicle to get there because it's so
I'm
difficult.
gonna come get you Saturday. We're gonna drink a whole fifth of bourbon up there on the edge of that rock.
Yeah, okay.
Otherwise, I can't assume you're from Pickens County.
But I guess my point is this isn't something that I don't think we're trying to rush through with anybody, and I hope that we'll all talk to our individual constituents to get the message out to them, because I think that's important.
I agree with that, and to Councilman Setta's point, I don't disagree with you because you did spend the last 18 months talking with, but I continue to run into people that have property up there, that own property up there, that live up there, that still have tons of questions, and they're not as well versed as some, as others, I guess I should say. So I think it's important that we continue to get that feedback. And the one thing I heard, and to the point, and I'm just going to say this, the 2 mile and to the state line, the one thing I heard consistently, because I purposely kept note, is very few people said I live on Highway 11. It was I live off this road, I live a 1/4 mile from Highway 11, I cross Highway 11. Very few people, and I'm not saying nobody, because we did have folks that lived on 11, but very few people that came up here and spoke actually lived on 11. And I think that's important to keep in mind. To your point, they are obviously passionate about protecting the whole area. Now, this is not a new thing. This is something we've discussed for 6 years, but the genie is out of the bottle, the lamp has been rubbed, and we have to do something about it at this point. So to the point of getting it done before December, that's something, whether it be a 2-step process, whether it be multiple ordinances, that's what you guys are going to bring back to us for us to make that best decision to move forward. And I want to make that clear as well. Nobody's saying that is the plan. So the motion on the table is for you to bring back the information as requested, pretty much everything we spoke about tonight. Any other conversation or discussion about the motion on the table? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Thank you, gentlemen.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Dr. Wilson. All in favor? Opposed? All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for bearing with us tonight. I know how comfortable those seats are.
I think that we were all talking something a little bit different. We're saying the same thing, but we're talking, using different terms. It's wonderful when you figure that out, right?
Mr. Roper. Wait on Mr. Roper.
He wants people to go in there and punch this number in off their tax.
So, Mr. Roper, the gentleman the person, I don't even say gentleman, the person responsible for printing the tax bill.
Yes.
I'm not talking about the physical printing of, but the laying out of the tax bill. They work for you.
It's the auditor. So, literally today, I was over there printing something.
He is an elected official.
Yep. He reports for you. That's right.
No, they collect a paycheck from the county, but he is an elected official. Just like I can't tell the sheriff, go do this, that, or the other.
The auditor, the treasurer, the coroner, the sheriff, the clerk of court, we can't tell them. I was over there today arguing with the auditor. At the end of the day, I can't tell him what to do.
That's
But can count?
no.
They're elected officials, they're back to you.
We,
To us.
how many times have we tried to tell the sheriff to do something?
Okay, so
And he still don't do it.
we can go from there and talk to him if we get enough people that want to see it.
That's the auditor.
See, the
Auditor's job.
solution that you gave us was that people go in there and punch this number in.
That's something
and
we
they
can
get
do.
on the tax.
Yeah, I'm trying to do what I can do.
I know, well,
Yeah.
I know.
I really got these, gentlemen. I'm really sorry.
What percentage of people gonna do that?
Right
About-
now, the only person literally that ever
About-
brings it up is you, so
About-
maybe one out of 130,000 people.
No, I've talked to hundreds of people
Well, I ain't
about
heard
this.
from one of them.
I've talked to hundreds and none of them disagree.
Best I can tell right
None
now,
of them disagree.
we're building a website just to make you happy, as best I can tell. And we're
Well,
glad to
you
do it.
don't need to do that,
Well,
Ken.
I don't have any other choice. You're gonna come up here every month and say that I need to do something that I can't do.
What's the auditor's name?
Brent Sutton.
So we need to, when we start this, campaign, we need to be sending it to him.
He's the guy that does it. I ain't gonna tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but he's the guy that does it.
Okay. People need to know this. I mean,
It's on their tax bill now.
you've got, what is it?
63.7 mils.
Well, yeah, but it's included, you can't see what it is.
That's what we're trying to do through the website. So you can literally go in and type in your number and it'll tell you exactly.
Yeah, people ain't gonna do that. If it's laid there in front of them, they're gonna know, but see,
No,
when
I get what you're saying.
when you go
Alan,
to a
what you're
gas
getting is,
station.
what you're wanting to do is to pull that out and put it on the tax bill so that you can then use it for a political purpose.
No,
And that's
no,
perfectly
no.
legitimate. There's nothing wrong for you to do that.
No.
But it's got nothing to do with me. I'm trying to give you the data, but that's all I can do.
Well, I know, we all know that tax bill is going up, not a problem. People gonna look at
Bunch of
it like
people will
we're
go
trying
down.
to hide something. Now, if you pull into a gas station and you fill your car up, you know how much state tax you pay. You know how much
Do you?
road taxes.
Do
Yeah,
you?
you, 28 cents
Is
per
it
gallon.
printed out on a receipt or something like that? I don't know.
Some of them do. Yeah, some of them do. Some
Most
of them
people
don't.
are not gonna know that.
But, I mean, it's right there. It's right there. They can see it. They can't see it in the county, and I get 20 some odd notices every year, and I've got to go in there and poke that number in on those things, and go in there and add them up.
If you don't wanna know bad enough to put that number in, then you don't wanna know too
I
awful
don't see,
bad.
that's not the way you need to look at it.
That's why
You,
not.
no, that's not serving the people.
I can't change
That's
your
not
tax
serving.
bill. I can give you some tools to use, and I'm doing that. But now you want me to be some super powerful czar over the auditor that reports to y'all?
I just know the direction to go in.
Yeah.
You know, we need to go to him and say, will you do this? And if you won't do it, then we're gonna go to the public and say, well, this is what we want.
I mean, that's your right to do it.
That's the way to do it, right?
I mean, that's your right. I ain't gonna tell you what to do or not do.
bring the grocery store to